Caden opened his eyes and saw a ceiling made of rotten planks. His body ached as if he'd been put through a meat grinder. His arms were thin, his fingers were calloused. His ribs jutted out from under his skin like the keys of an old piano. He tried to stand up and hit his head on a low beam. His mouth tasted of stale bread and blood. The last thing he remembered was the wet asphalt outside the office in Seattle and a truck hurtling straight toward his face. The chance of dying from a banana peel is 0.00003%. He beat those odds. And now he's lying in someone else's body in a room that smells of mold and sourdough. Someone is screaming behind the wall. A woman's voice, shrill and angry. She's screaming that today is Judgment Day and that if this good-for-nothing boy disgraces the family in front of the temple, he might as well never have been born. Caden sat on the edge of the bed and looked at his palms. 17 years old. The body of a 17-year-old boy as skinny as a stray dog. In his mind, someone else's memories surfaced in fragmented pieces. His name is Caden Rowe, the son of a baker from the village of Windmer. Nickname, Zero. Teased since he was 6. His mother beats him for every broken plate because his luck attracts misfortune. His brother, Darian, takes his food and laughs. Yesterday, in front of the whole village, his fiancée, Leah, took Darian by the arm and walked away without looking back. Caden rubbed his temples. A data analyst from an insurance company trapped in the body of a village outcast. What a great start. The door swung open. A woman with a flushed face and sweat-drenched hair grabbed him by the ear and dragged him toward the exit. She said the priest was waiting, that all the neighbors had already gathered, and that if he was late, she'd drown him in the well herself. Caden didn't resist. He walked down the village's narrow street and counted, an analyst's habit. 23 houses, 4 wells, 1 temple on the hill with white walls and a crystal spire. About 100 residents, judging by the number of doors and clotheslines. The village is poor, the fences are crooked, the roofs are patched, but the temple shines like new. Because the temple is the only thing that matters here. In this world, one thing decides everything. Luck. Not strength, not intelligence, not hard work. 3 numbers that the crystal ball reveals to every child at age 6. Luck of combat, luck of discovery, and luck of destiny. These numbers determine who will be accepted into the academy, who they'll be married off to, who will be trusted to lead a caravan through the mountains. Aristocrats are born with scores above 80, treasure hunters above 60. Peasants make do with 20 or 40. These aren't just numbers, they're currency, status, a verdict. The square in front of the temple was packed with people. The whole village had come to watch. Caden spotted a 19-year-old guy with broad shoulders and a smug smirk. Darian, his older brother. Standing next to him was a girl with chestnut hair and downcast eyes. Leah, his former fiancée. She was holding Darian's hand and wasn't looking in Caden's direction. Darian had passed the assessment at age 6 and received a Fates fortune of 91. From that day on, he became the family's golden child. From that day on, Caden became trash. The priest stepped out onto the temple steps. An old man in white robes holding a crystal orb the size of a human head. The orb glowed from within with a soft blue light. The priest announced that today was the second assessment for those who had turned 17. In Ireland, everyone gets 2 chances, the first at age 6, the second at 17. If your scores have improved, new doors open. If they've dropped, old ones close. Caden climbed the steps. The crowd fell silent. He placed his palms on the orb. A chill ran through his fingers, up his arms, and straight to his heart. The orb flared to life. Numbers appeared in the air above him as white, glowing symbols. Combat luck, 0.2. Discovery luck, 0.4. Fate luck, 0.3. Silence. Then someone laughed. Then everyone laughed. The priest looked at the numbers and shook his head. He said that in the temple's 1,000-year history, this was the lowest reading he'd ever seen. He took Caden's certificate and tore it in half. He said that Caden wasn't a human being, but a curse. That his luck was so low that he was a danger to those around him. That things broke, food went bad, and people fell ill whenever he was nearby. The crowd began to murmur. Caden's mother was the first to turn away. She covered her face with her hands and stepped back into the crowd. His father stood with a stony expression. Then he spat at his feet and walked away. Darian put his arm around Leah's waist and said loudly enough for everyone to hear that now it was clear why Leah had chosen him. Even bread goes stale faster next to Noel. Leah didn't look up. Caden stood on the steps of the temple and looked out at the crowd. 100 faces. Not a single sympathetic glance. The analyst inside him was already doing the math. 0.2 plus 0.4 plus 0.3. Total luck? 0.9. The average peasant scores between 60 and 120. He's below 1. The probability of such a score is roughly 1 in 50 million. He'd won the anti-lottery again. Caden walked down the steps. People parted before him as if he were contagious. He walked through the village toward the northern trail. Beyond the village, the trail climbed into the hills. Beyond the hills lay a cliff. He knew this from other people's memories. The former owner of this body had thought about the cliff every evening for the past 3 years. Caden walked and thought. Not about jumping, about mathematics. In a world where probability decides everything, his probabilities were 0. That meant any bet on him was pointless. Any attempt was doomed. Any plan was stillborn. That's what everyone around him thought, but the analyst in him saw something else. 0 is not absence. 0 is a variable. At the insurance company, he worked every day with numbers that everyone else considered insignificant. 0.00003%, 0.0001%. Numbers outside the margin of error, numbers that no one counts because they're too small. But it's precisely these numbers that kill people. It's precisely these numbers that change the world. He knew this better than anyone, because he himself had died because of such a number. The trail led him to the crest of the hill. A cliff lay ahead. Below, a river and rocks. The wind whipped his face. Caden stopped and stepped on something. A crunch under his foot. Something thin and rustling like parchment. He bent down and picked up a scroll. It was old. The edges were scorched. On the surface were lines drawn in faded ink. A map. A small map of the Windmer area. Hills, a river, a forest, and a single dot, red, with an inscription written in a brown color resembling dried blood. The inscription read, "Here. Chance, 0.00001%. Dig." Caden stood at the edge of the cliff with the map in his hands and felt his heart pounding in his throat. The analyst inside him was already at work. 0.00001% is 1 chance in 10 million. In his old world, he wouldn't even have included something like that in a report, beyond the margin of error. But someone had spent their own blood to mark that spot. Someone knew there was something there. And that knowledge wasn't luck. It was data. And data was the only thing he had, both in the old world and in the new. He looked at the cliff, then at the map. A red dot indicated a spot 300 meters from the trail, an old stump at the edge of the forest. Caden turned and walked toward the stump. He wasn't going to die. He was going to dig. At that moment, something flashed before his eyes. Translucent symbols hung in the air, like an interface, like a screen that only he could see. The message read, "The cartographer of the impossible system has been activated. Carrier confirmed. Map of the incredible loaded. Current status, tickets of destiny 0. Artifacts found 0. People who believe in the carrier 0. Caden blinked. He read it again. The system, just like in the games he'd read about during his lunch breaks. Only this wasn't a game. This was his new life. He looked at the map in his hands. Now, on the parchment, next to the red dot, an icon was glowing. A discovery. Chance, 0.00001%. Type, unknown. Value, unknown. He reached the stump in 20 minutes. An old oak tree snapped by a storm. Its roots jutted out of the ground like twisted fingers. The ground around it was trampled. A path ran nearby. Hundreds of people walked past this stump every day. No one had ever dug there. Why dig under a stump? The odds of finding anything useful there for someone with average luck were 0. But the map said to dig. And Caden began to dig. With a stick, with his hands, with his fingernails. The soil was dense. The roots were tangled. His fingers were bleeding. An hour later, a neighbor walked by. He stopped. He looked. He asked why 0 was digging a hole under the stump. Caden didn't answer. The neighbor shrugged and walked on. 2 hours later, a group of children came by. They sat down on the grass and watched him dig. One boy said that 0 was probably looking for his luck. The children laughed. Caden kept digging. 3 hours later, his mother arrived. She stood over him with her arms crossed and her face red with anger. She said he was bringing even more shame on the family than he had that morning, that all of Windmer was watching and laughing, that his father had forbidden him from coming home. Caden looked up at her from the waist-deep hole. His hands were covered in blood and dirt. He said nothing. He kept digging. His mother left. His finger struck something hard. Not a rock, not a root. Something smooth and cold. Metal. Caden cleared the dirt away around it. A hilt. Black, carved with the image of a running wolf. He pulled. The earth wouldn't let go. He braced his feet against the sides of the pit and pulled again. The blade emerged from the ground with a crunch and a sound like a sigh. A black sword, a handspan long. The blade without a single speck of rust. A rune on the blade, glowing, blue. A wolf. The system flashed before his eyes. Artifact detected. Helion's Fang. Legendary rank. The sword of the first king of Erlin. Lost 700 years ago in the Battle of Stone Pass. Probability of discovery? 0.00001%. Current owner unknown. Caden stood waist-deep in the pit, holding the sword that the first king of this world had lost 700 years ago. His hands were trembling, not from fear, from realization. The map works. The system works. And the numbers that this whole world considers meaningless turned out to be the only numbers that matter. A crowd had already gathered. A neighbor who had passed by an hour ago had told someone. That person told someone else. Now there were about 30 people standing around the stump. They looked at the black blade and remained silent. Village head Gwen Malroy pushed her way through the crowd, a 50-year-old woman with a stern face and a piercing gaze, Dariana's maternal aunt. She took the sword in her hands, turned it over, saw the rune, and turned pale. She said it was the Fang of Helion, that this rune appears in every history textbook, that the continent's best hunters, with a luck rating above 70, had been searching for this sword for 200 years. And it had been lying right here, under a tree stump, 300 meters from the village. The crowd buzzed. Someone whispered the word miracle. Someone said it was impossible. Darian stood in the back rows, his face as white as chalk. The second point on the map pulsed with a warm orange light. Caden unfolded the parchment and squinted. The system highlighted the marker. Encounter type, probability 0.0004%. The coordinates led to a swamp 2 hours walk east of Windmer. Caden looked up at the sky. The sun was sinking toward the west. 4 hours until dark. If he walked quickly, he might make it in time. He walked along the trail through the forest, lost in thought. The system had shown him the event type, encounter, not a discovery. So there wasn't an object in the swamp, it was a person, or a creature, with a 0.0004% chance, 1 in 250,000. In his old world, that was roughly the same as the chance of being bitten by a shark in a freshwater lake, an event bordering on the impossible. But the map had led him to the sword, and the sword turned out to be real. So the map wasn't lying. The forest ended. Thickets of reeds and moss-covered mounds began to appear. The air smelled of stagnant water and rotting leaves. Caden treaded carefully. He tested every step with his stick.
In a world with zero luck, a swamp is a place where you can drown after slipping on a frog. He'd already died once from a banana peel. He didn't want to go through that again. The orange dot on the map was getting closer. 100 meters. 50. 20. Caden stopped. A girl was sitting on a mound in front of him, 17 years old, skinny. Her dark hair was pulled back into a messy ponytail. Her hands were elbow-deep in swamp mud. Next to her stood a basket of herbs and an empty jar. The girl was crying, quietly, silently. Tears streamed down her cheeks, and she wiped them away with her dirty hand, leaving brown streaks on her face. Caden recognized her. A stranger's memory prompted the name. Hanapak, the daughter of the herbalist Windmer, the only person in the village who had never called him Noel. She called him by his name, always, even when the other children threw stones at him. 12. Low, but not disgraceful. Enough to be considered human. Not enough to get out of Windmer. Caden stepped closer. Hana raised her head. Her eyes were red. Her face was covered in dirt and despair. She said her mother was dying. Ash cough, a disease that burns the lungs in 40 days. The mortality rate is 73%. A cure exists, but it requires a single ingredient, the saliva of a moon toad, a creature that emerges from the swamp only on a full moon and only for 3 minutes. The chance of catching it is 0.004%. Hana has been going to the swamp every night for a month now. She hasn't seen the toad even once. 3 healers from neighboring villages have refused to help. The temple priest said that with a luck of 12, hunting a moon toad is pointless. She needs a hunter with a luck score of at least 60. There are none like that in Windmer. Caden listened and did the math. 0.004%. 1 chance in 25,000 attempts. At 1 attempt per month, Hana would need 25,000 months. That's the year 2083. Her mother has 20 days left. Math is a cruel thing. But math also told him something else. If the map can mark events with a 0.00001% chance, then an event with a 0.004% chance is 400 times more likely. That's almost a guarantee, by his map's standards. Caden asked when the next full moon was. Hana replied that it was tonight, the last full moon before his mother entered the final stage. If he didn't catch the toad tonight, it would be too late tomorrow. Caden looked at the map. An orange dot was right where they were standing. A meeting type. He had met Hana. But a third dot was beginning to appear nearby. A green one. A discovery type. A 0.004% chance. The coordinates were 200 meters from here. Caden understood. The system hadn't led him to Hana by accident. The system had led him to Hana because her mother was dying. And the map had marked the moon toad because Caden wasn't searching for himself. He was searching for a specific person, Hana's mother. The system's limitation worked both ways. Selfishness blinds the map. Care reveals it. He told Hana to stay here and prepare the can. He'd be back in an hour. Hana looked at him with an expression he'd seen 1,000 times in his past life. The face of someone who no longer believes but is afraid to give up their last chance. She nodded. Caden walked through the swamp. A green dot guided him through the reeds, across the marsh, and through thickets of sedge that cut into his hands. It was getting dark. The moon was rising above the horizon, round, white, bright. In the moonlight, the swamp looked like a silver mirror, beautiful and deadly. The green dot stopped. Caden stood knee-deep in water in front of a large, moss-covered rock. The system illuminated the rock. Analyst's eye activated. Rock, 87% moss, 12.99% granite, 0.01% moon toad inside a cavity. Caden blinked. Inside a cavity?
The toad was sitting inside the rock, in a crevice invisible from the outside. That's why no one catches it. It doesn't come onto the rock, it comes out of the rock. 3 minutes during a full moon. Hunters with a luck of 60 stand by the swamp looking for the toad on the water's surface, but it's sitting inside the rock. Data that no one has, except him. Caden crouched down. He found a crevice, narrow, 2 fingers wide, darkness inside. He took a piece of hardtack out of his pocket, the only food he had. He crumbled it and scattered the crumbs at the entrance to the crevice. He sat down and waited. 20 minutes, 30, 40. The moon rose to its zenith. Its light fell directly on the rock, and a head appeared from the crack. Small, silvery, with eyes like 2 drops of mercury. A moon toad, the size of a fist. Its skin shimmered in the moonlight like quicksilver. It looked at the crumbs. It looked at Caden, and leaped toward the food. Caden didn't move. The toad ate. He slowly raised his hand, more slowly than ever before in his life, and covered the toad with his palm. It twitched. He held it. Slime trickled down his fingers, cold and slippery. He reached for the jar with his other hand. He held it up to the toad's snout. The toad spat into the jar. A defensive reflex. Perfect. He let go of the toad. It jumped into a crevice and vanished. At the bottom of the jar, a clear liquid with a silvery sheen glistened. Moon toad saliva. The system flashed. Find confirmed. Moon toad saliva. Rarity, rare. Drop rate, 0.004%. Alchemical use. Caden walked back across the swamp with the jar in his hands and a smile on his face. A silly, broad smile, the kind no analyst in the world could explain. Hannah was waiting on a mound. She wasn't crying anymore. She was just sitting there, staring into the darkness. When Caden emerged from the reeds with the jar held aloft, she couldn't believe it. She took the jar, looked at the contents, looked at him, and screamed. For the first time in his life, he heard Hannah Park scream, not from pain, not from fear, from hope. They ran back to the village, Hannah in front, Caden behind her. His feet were wet and muddy, and his side was stinging, but he ran. The herbalist's house stood on the edge of the village, small, with a vegetable garden and the scent of dried herbs wafting from every crack. Inside, a woman lay on the bed, thin, with gray skin and sunken eyes. With every breath, a sound came from her chest as if someone were tearing wet fabric. Ash cough. A 73% mortality rate in 40 days. She had about 15 days left. Hannah took out a mortar and some herbs. Her hands trembled, but her movements were precise. Her mother had taught her since childhood. Grind the moon root. Add heather juice. 3 drops of moon toad saliva. Stir counterclockwise. Heat over a candle, but don't boil it. The potion turned pale blue. Hannah lifted her mother's head and poured the potion into her mouth. A minute passed. 2. 5. The woman on the bed shuddered. She coughed. A wisp of gray dust flew from her mouth. Then a second. A third. Her lungs were clearing. She took a breath. Deeply. Filling her lungs completely. For the first time in a month. Hannah fell to her knees beside the bed and pressed her face against her mother's hand. Caden stood by the door. He watched the scene before him and thought that in his past life he had filled out insurance claim forms. The diagnosis column, the chance of recovery column, the cost of treatment column. He had never seen the faces of the people behind those columns. Now he did. The system flashed. Fate ticket received. Quantity, 2. Reason? Hannah Park believed in the carrier. Hannah stood up. She walked over to him. She was a head shorter than him. Her eyes were wet. Her face was covered in dirt and tears, and she had the most beautiful smile he'd ever seen in 2 lifetimes. She stood on tiptoe and kissed him on the cheek, quickly, like a bird pecking. Then she stepped back. Her face was red. She took out a notebook and wrote, "Thank you. Just thank you." Caden opened his mouth to say something clever, or at least something normal. At that moment, an arrow flew through the window. It lodged in the wall 10 centimeters from his head. A note was tied to the arrow. Caden pulled out the arrow.
He unfolded the note. The handwriting was large and crooked. The message was short. "Return the sword, or the next one will hit you." There was no signature, but Caden recognized that handwriting. Someone else's memories told him. Darian. His brother used to write just as crookedly when he copied Caden's homework 3 years ago. Caden looked out the window. Darkness. No one was there. He looked at the arrow, at the note, at the hole in the wall. The analyst in him took note. The arrow had entered at a 30-degree angle from top to bottom. That meant it had been shot from higher ground, the hill behind Hannah's house, a distance of 50 meters. Darian was a good shot. With a luck rating of 91, he could hit whatever he aimed at, so he missed on purpose. This wasn't an assassination attempt. It was a warning. Hannah grabbed his sleeve. Her eyes were wide with fear. She said he couldn't stay here, that when Darian gets angry, he doesn't stop. That last year, he broke the arm of a boy who accidentally stepped on his foot. Caden nodded. The morning began with a kick. Caden opened his eyes and saw a boot flying toward his side. Darian was standing in the barn doorway. Behind him were 2 guys, burly, country folk, the kind who follow Darian around like a prince's entourage. With a luck of 91 in the world of Erlen, you can assemble any group you want. People are drawn to high numbers like moths to a flame. Darian said that the village head had sold the fangs of Helion to a merchant for 800 gold pieces. The village will get a new well. But everyone says that Caden found the sword. That's not right. It's a disgrace to the family. Zero couldn't have found a legendary artifact, so he must have stolen it, or planted it, or someone planted it for him. One of the guys behind Darian said he saw Caden digging a hole for 3 hours. A thief doesn't dig a hole for 3 hours in full view of the whole village. Darian turned to him, and the guy fell silent. A luck of 91 means that even Darian's words carry more weight. Caden sat down on the hay and looked at his brother. The analyst inside him was already doing the math. Darian hadn't come to kill. He'd come to intimidate. The arrow yesterday was a warning. Today's visit with 2 bodyguards was a show of force, a classic intimidation tactic. At the insurance company, he'd seen this every quarter when major clients came to pressure the appraisers. The tactic is the same in any world. Caden stood up. He brushed the hay off his clothes. Then he said that if Darian wanted to prove the sword was a fake, he should go to the village elder and demand an expert appraisal. The chance of a Helion rune being forged is 0.0001%. Not a single blacksmith within a radius of 500 kilometers possesses the technology of the First Age. If Darian is right and the sword is a fake, the appraisal will prove it. If not, Darian will publicly admit he was wrong. Darian remained silent. His face flushed. He hadn't expected logic. He'd expected fear. The old Caden would have curled up into a ball and cried. The new Caden spoke in numbers and facts. Darian turned and walked out. He stopped at the door. He said this wasn't the end, that Aunt Gwen had already sent a letter to the Appraisers Guild, that they would come and sort things out, and then Caden would regret it. Caden shrugged and said he'd wait. The door slammed shut. Caden exhaled. His hands were shaking, not from the cold, from adrenaline. He'd just challenged a man with a luck of 91 while having a luck of 0.3. According to local laws of probability, Darian should automatically win any conflict. But here's the thing. Logic doesn't bow to luck. Facts don't change based on the number hanging over your head. The sword is real, and no luck 91 can make it fake. Caden unfolded the map. A new morning, new markers.
1. Red. A find. Probability 0.0003%. The coordinates led to a farm on the southern edge of the village. Village Elder Gwen's farm. The system highlighted additional information. Coincidences log updated. The Bowl of Fortune, an artifact of the First Era. Legendary rank. Lost 400 years ago. Last known location, Merchant Balthazar Cray's caravan on the Windmer route. Caravan missing. Cargo not found. Caden reread it. Merchant's caravan. Windmer route. Disappeared 400 years ago. Cargo not found. Red dot at the village headman's farm. He began piecing it together. 400 years ago, a caravan carrying the cup passed through Windmer. The caravan disappeared. But what if not the entire caravan? What if one wagon broke away? What if the merchant sold part of the cargo to local farmers?
What if the chalice ended up in Windmer 400 years ago and has since been passed from hand to hand, along with property that no one considered valuable? The dot on the map was at the farm, not in the house, not in the barn, in the pasture. The analyst's eye suggested a possibility that a normal person would never have considered. A cow. Cows eat everything: rocks, rags, small objects. An artifact the size of a cup could have ended up in the feed trough, could have been swallowed, and could have been lying in a cow's stomach for years. The cows on the village headman's farm live a long time. The oldest one, Berta, was bought 30 years ago from a traveling merchant, who bought her from another merchant, who may have received her from a caravan driver 400 years ago. It's a long chain. The probability is negligible, 0.0003%. But the card said to dig. Caden headed for the farm. On the way, he stopped by Hannah's house. Hannah's mother was sitting on the bed eating porridge. Her complexion had changed from gray to pale pink. Her breathing was steady. Her cough had almost stopped. Hannah stood nearby, a notebook in her hands, smiling so widely that her eyes narrowed to slits. Caden told her he was going to the village headman's farm and that he needed help. Hannah asked what kind. He replied that he needed someone who knew about the anatomy of large livestock. Hannah blinked. She said she knew what he meant. Her mother was an herbalist and treated not only people but also animals. Since she was 12, Hannah had helped her mother stitch up cows and give enemas to goats. Caden nodded and said, "Great, because we're going to have to go inside a cow." Hannah blinked again. They arrived at the farm. Village Elder Gwen met them at the gate. She looked at Caden with an expression that was a mix of suspicion and curiosity. After yesterday's sword incident, she didn't know what to think. Caden said he wanted to examine Bertha, the old cow. He explained that, according to his information, there might be something valuable in Bertha's stomach. Gwen asked what information he was referring to. Caden replied, "My own." Gwen narrowed her eyes. She said that Bertha was her best cow. She gave milk every day. She wouldn't let him cut her open. Caden said there was no need to cut her open. Hannah could extract the contents of her stomach without harming the animal. There was a procedure. Herbalists performed it when a cow swallowed something dangerous. Gwen looked at Hannah. Hannah nodded and opened her notebook. She wrote it down. The procedure is safe. Bertha will be alive and well. It will take an hour and some warm water. Gwen thought for a minute. Then she said that if anything happened to Bertha, Caden would pay, with his own skin. Caden agreed. The next hour was the messiest of both their lives. Hannah worked confidently and quickly. She knew the anatomy of a cow's stomach just as well as Caden knew probability tables. Bertha mooed but didn't resist. 3 stones were removed from her stomach: a piece of rope, a rusty nail, and a bowl. A small one, a golden one, with runes along the rim, about the size of a child's fist, covered in mucus and gastric juices. Caden held the bowl in his hands and watched as the system highlighted the information. Artifact detected. The Bowl of Fortune. Legendary rank. Increases the settlement's total luck by 20 points within a 5-kilometer radius. Duration, 1 year.
requires activation by the settlement's owner. Lost 400 years ago, found in the stomach of a cow named Bertha. Caden almost laughed.
400 years of searching, hundreds of expeditions, thousands of hunters with luck above 60. And all this time, the bull had been lying in the stomach of a cow on the village headman's farm. Gwen stood beside him as white as a sheet. She had read the runes. She knew what it was. The whole village knew the story of the Cup of Fortune, an artifact they'd been searching for 400 years. One that could save any settlement from the royal tax. One worth more than all of Windmer, with all its houses, wells, and cows combined. And it lay in Bertha. Caden handed the bowl to the village elder. He said the village needed 13 luck points. The bowl grants 20, more than enough. Let him activate it. Gwen took the bowl. Her hands were shaking. She asked why he was giving it away, why he wouldn't sell it, why he wouldn't take the bowl to the capital and become rich. Caden replied that in the capital there were no people who would be sold into the mines in 12 days. But in Windmer there were. Gwen silently activated the chalice. A golden light rose from the artifact and spread across the ground like a warm wave. Caden felt something change in the air, as if the world had become a little gentler, a little kinder, a little more generous. Windmer's total luck had risen from 487 to 507. The tax was cleared. In 12 days, the tax collector would arrive and leave empty-handed. No mines, no sales. Gwen stood in the middle of her farm with a golden bowl in her hands and tears in her eyes. She said she had been wrong, that when Darian came to her and said that Caden had stolen the sword, she believed him, because it was easier that way, because 0 couldn't be a hero, because numbers don't lie. 3 days had passed since the chalice was found. Caden was living in the barn. His father wouldn't let him into the house. His mother brought him food in secret. She would set a bowl by the door and leave without saying a word. Porridge, bread, sometimes an apple. She couldn't openly support her son because his father had forbidden it, and his father couldn't openly support his son because Darian was his eldest and the best. Odds, 91 to 0.3. In this world, numbers determine even family relationships. Caden didn't complain. The barn was a roof. The hay was a bed. A bowl of porridge meant calories. An analyst counts resources, not grievances. Every morning he unfolded the map. Every morning new dots appeared on the parchment. Small ones, insignificant ones. A widow's lost ring from West Street. A coin in a storm drain. A healing mushroom at the root of an old elm tree. Caden walked through the village and found things. Every day. 3 or 4 finds. None of them were legendary, but each one was needed by a specific person. He returned the ring to the widow. She burst into tears. She said it was her late husband's ring, and she'd been looking for it for half a year. He took the mushroom to Hannah. She dried it and added it to her first aid kit. He kept the coin for himself. He bought a bar of soap at the market. For the first time in 3 days, he washed himself properly. The system recorded every find, every return, every tear of gratitude. But it didn't give him any new tickets of fate. Caden understood. The tickets aren't for discoveries. The tickets are for faith. The widow was grateful but didn't believe in him. She believed in luck. She thought she'd gotten lucky, that the ring had been found by chance. She didn't connect the discovery to Caden. The system distinguishes. On the 4th day, Darian struck again. Not with an arrow, not with his fist, with a word. He stood in the square that morning as people were heading to the market, and he announced that Caden was a thief, that Helion's fang had been stolen from a traveling merchant's collection and planted under a tree stump, that the Cup of Fortune was a fake, that he, Darian Rowe, with a luck rating of 91, had personally verified this and was certain of his words. The crowd wavered. Luck 91 is no joke. In Ireland, the word of a person with high luck carries more weight than facts, because lucky means right. That's how the world works.
That's how people's minds have been brainwashed. Caden stood in the crowd and listened. He could have objected. He could have presented arguments. He could have explained that Helion's rune couldn't be forged and that the chalice had undergone an activation process impossible for a fake artifact. But he didn't. Instead, he stepped forward and proposed a wager, a public one, in front of the whole village, a luck exchange. He would lend his 0.3 luck to Darian. Darian would lend his 91 to Caden, for 1 minute. Then Darian would flip a coin, with a luck value of 0.3. If it landed on heads, Caden was a thief. If it landed on tails, Caden was honest, simple, elegant, and fair according to the laws of a world where luck decides everything. Darian laughed. He said it was silly, that a coin is just a coin, that the odds are 50-50 no matter what the luck. Caden shook his head. He explained slowly and clearly so the whole square could hear. In Erlen, luck influences everything. Every roll, every chance, every coin. With a luck rating of 91, Darian gets the desired outcome 91 times out of 100. With a luck rating of 0.3, he'll get the desired outcome 3 times out of 1,000. If Darian wants heads and he's confident in his words, his luck should help him. But if he chooses a luck rating of 0.3, his confidence will be useless. Only the truth would remain. The crowd grew restless. The logic was ironclad, according to the laws of their own world. Darian couldn't refuse. Refusal would mean he was afraid, that his 91 luck was based not on truth, but on privilege. It was impossible to admit that in front of the whole village. He agreed. Caden activated the luck exchange. The system highlighted the process. Caden Rowe's luck has been temporarily transferred to Darian Rowe, 0.3. Darian Rowe's luck has been temporarily transferred to Caden Rowe, 91. Duration, 60 seconds. Caden felt it like a warm wave from the top of his head to the tips of his toes. The world felt different, brighter, lighter, as if the air itself were carrying him forward. So this is how people with high luck feel, as if everything in the world were made for them. Darian, on the other hand, turned pale. He shuddered. He looked at his hands as if they belonged to someone else. With a luck score of 0.3, the world feels oppressive. Every stone underfoot is a potential trap. Every gust of wind is a threat. That's how Caden lived every day. Darian took out a coin. His hands were shaking. He tossed it. The coin soared. It spun in the air. It fell and landed on its edge. On its edge. Not heads, not tails. On its edge. The crowd gasped. The probability of a coin landing on its edge is roughly 1 in 6,000. With a luck rating of 0.3, even such an improbable outcome becomes possible. Because 0.3 isn't just low luck. It's luck that attracts the impossible, the strangest outcomes, the most unbelievable results. A coin on its edge is an answer that didn't prove either side right. It's an answer that said, the question was asked wrong. Caden is neither a thief nor a hero. Caden is something else entirely, something this world has never seen before. The exchange was over. Caden felt that familiar heaviness again. 0.3. His familiar 0.3. Like old clothes that pinch but whose every seam you know by heart. Darian stood as white as a sheet. The coin lay on the ground, on its edge. No one dared to touch it. Caden turned to the crowd and said one sentence. 0 is not nothing. 0 is the starting point. And he walked away. Hannah ran after him. She caught up with him at the exit from the square. She grabbed his sleeve. Her eyes were burning. She told him quickly and quietly that Darian wouldn't stop. That Aunt Gwen had sent a letter to the Appraisers Guild 3 days ago. That the guild would arrive in a week. That the Golden Seal Guild controls the artifact market throughout the entire region. If they declare Caden's finds to be forgeries, he's finished. They'll send him to the mines for fraud. Caden listened. He thought it over. The Appraisers Guild, a regional monopoly. It controls the appraisal and sale of all artifacts. Their word is law. Their seal is the only guarantee of authenticity. If they're against him, any artifact he finds will be declared a fake. Not because it's a fake, but because Caden, with a luck score of 0.3, doesn't fit into their system. The system says high luck equals valuable finds, low luck equals junk. Caden shatters this equation by the very fact of his existence, and they can't let that happen. Hannah said that the head of the regional guild is Magister Orton Vale, a tough guy. He considers luck a commodity. He sells appraisals to whoever pays. He underestimates the true value of artifacts so he can buy them up cheaper. A monopolist through and through. Caden nodded. In his past life, he'd worked with people like that. Insurance companies that underpay claims, appraisers who lie in their reports, managers who cook the books. A different world, the same people. He asked when the guild would arrive. Hannah replied, in 7 days, maybe sooner. 7 days. Caden looked at the map. Not a single new marker. The system was silent. He thought and realized. Markers don't appear when he searches for himself. Right now, he was thinking about his own protection, about his survival.
About his problem. Selfishness blinds the map. He closed his eyes. He shifted his focus. He stopped thinking about the guild. He thought about Hannah, about her mother who was recovering, about how Hannah needed herbs to continue her treatment, about how the best herbs grew in Blue Glade to the south, about how no one goes there because there are poisonous snakes in the ravine. He opened his eyes. He looked at the map. A green dot, a find of sorts, a 0.002% chance, the coordinates for Blue Ravine. It's working. The map responds to his intention, to his concern, to the specific person he's searching for. Caden told Hannah he was going to Blue Ravine to gather herbs for her mother. Hannah said she would go with him. He wanted to object. Blue Ravine was a dangerous place. Poisonous snakes, slippery trails. With his luck at 0.3, every snake would be aiming specifically at him. But Hannah was already walking ahead, a notebook in one hand, a basket for herbs in the other. Her back was straight. Her stride was confident. She wasn't shy anymore. She'd made up her mind. And Caden followed her. On the way, he thought about the guild, about the trial, about how in 7 days he'd have to stand before the man who controls the entire artifact market and prove that his finds were genuine. He didn't have a lawyer, no money, no connections, no luck. He had a map, an analytical mind from another world, 2 tickets of destiny, and a girl with a notebook walking beside him who wouldn't turn away. That was enough for a start. Blue Log greeted them with fog, thick white fog so dense that Caden couldn't see his own feet. The trail wound its way between moss-covered rocks. Every step was slippery. Every route was a trap. With a luck score of 0.3, Caden stumbled 4 times in the first 10 minutes. Hannah walked ahead. She knew this glen. Her mother used to bring her here as a child to gather rare herbs. Before she got sick. Before her legs gave out. Hannah walked with confidence. She skirted the rocks. She stepped over the roots. She was right at home here. Caden followed her, thinking that in any pair, there's always one who leads and one who follows. In his past life, he had always followed. His boss, his colleagues, the rules written by someone else. Here, too, he was following. The girl with the notebook and the basket. And he was fine with it. The green dot on the map was pulsing, 200 meters ahead. 100. 50. Caden stopped. The analyst's eye activated automatically. A rock lay before him. A large one, covered in moss. An ordinary rock. But the system saw something else. Rock, 94% granite, 5.9% moss, 0.08% void, 0.02% unknown content. Empty space. The rock was hollow. There was something inside. Caden walked around the rock. He found a crack, a narrow one, about the width of his palm. He peered inside. Darkness. But something glowed in the darkness. Green. Dim. Like a cat's eye in the dark. He slipped his hand into the crack. His fingers touched something smooth, round, cold. He pulled it out. A stone. No, not a stone. A sphere the size of an apple. Green. Translucent. Something was moving inside. Like smoke. Like living mist. The system lit up. A find detected. A dryad seed.
Rarity, rare. Alchemical use. When planted in the soil, it grows into a healing tree within whose radius wounds heal 3 times faster. Chance of finding, 0.002%. Note, not an artifact of the First Age. Caden turned the sphere over in his hands. A dryad seed, not legendary, but not junk either. A tree that heals wounds. For a village with just one herbalist and not a single doctor, this is a treasure. Hana walked over and looked at the sphere. Her eyes widened. She said that the dryad seed is considered a lost species. The last healing tree was cut down 200 years ago because the local lord wanted to sell the wood. Not a single seed had been found since then. Her mother used to talk about them as if they were a fairy tale. Caden held out the sphere to Hana. She didn't take it. She looked at him and shook her head. She wrote something in her notebook. "This is for the village. Plant it by Mom's house. It'll grow." Caden nodded and put the seed in his bag. They continued on their way. Hana gathered herbs, moonroot, silver moss, and night rosehip berries. She cut each plant carefully and wrapped it in cloth. Her hands moved quickly. Her movements were precise. She worked silently and intently. Caden stood nearby, studying the map. No new markers were appearing. The day was quiet, peaceful. The first peaceful day since he'd arrived in this world. They were making their way back through the forest when Caden heard voices. Ahead on the trail. 4 of them. No, 5. Rough, loud, and one familiar face. Darian. Caden grabbed Hannah by the hand and pulled her off the trail into the bushes. They hid. A minute later, the group passed by. Darian in the lead. Behind him were 4 men Caden didn't recognize. Not villagers. Dressed in worn leather, knives on their belts. One with a short sword. Mercenaries. Or bandits. In this world, there's little difference. Darian spoke quietly, but Caden heard him. Darian said the objective was simple. Find Caden. Take the map. If he tried to resist, Darian paused and added that the main thing was to leave no witnesses. One of the bandits asked, "What if there are witnesses?" Darian replied that there'd be a separate fee for witnesses. The group continued down the trail toward the village. Caden sat in the bushes and counted. 5 of them. Armed. One of them was his brother with a luck of 91. Caden was unarmed. Luck 0.3. Chances in a direct confrontation, 0. Not even 0, 3 zeros. Just 0. Hannah was trembling beside him. Not from the cold, from fear. She whispered that they had to run, that they had to leave Winmer, that Darian had gone mad, that they couldn't stay. Caden thought. Run. Logical, safe, the right thing to do. But if he ran away, the village would be left without him. Gwen would be defenseless against the guild. Hana would be without help. Hana's mother would be without her herbs. The widow would be without her ring. And everything would go back to the way it was. 0 ran away. 0 is just 0. He won't run, but he won't fight either. An analyst doesn't fight. An analyst calculates. And right now, he was calculating something else. Darian had hired thugs. That meant he'd spent money. Where would a country boy get the money to hire mercenaries? There was only one answer. Aunt Gwen, the village elder. She believed in Caden. She gave him the ticket of destiny. But she was also Darian's aunt. Blood is thicker than faith. She believed in Caden, but never stopped loving her nephew. And when Darian came to her and asked for money, she didn't ask why. Or maybe she asked, but didn't want to hear the answer. A double game. Classic. Caden had seen this hundreds of times in the corporate world. A manager praises you at a meeting and then files a complaint with the higher-ups afterward. People are more complicated than numbers. They always have been, in any world. Caden and Hana took the path through the forest, the long way around, 2 hours instead of 1. They returned to Windmer from the back, through the vegetable gardens. Caden walked Hana home. Hana's mother was sitting by the window, cleaning herbs. Her breathing was steady. Her cheeks were rosy. The treatment was working. Hana hugged her mother and showed her the basket of fresh herbs. Her mother smiled. She looked at Caden standing in the doorway. And for the first time in all the years he could remember, through someone else's memory, she said thank you to him. Not Caden's mother, Hannah's mother. A stranger he had saved with someone else's hands, in someone else's body, in a foreign world. But the word thank you is the same in any world, and it carries the same weight. Caden stepped outside. He planted the dryad seed beneath the window of Hannah's house. He buried it in the ground, a palm's depth. He watered it with water from the well, the new well they'd bought with the money from selling Helion's fang. Connection after connection, action after action. Every step leads to the next.
The analyst in him saw a chain, not of coincidences, but of consequences. He returned to his barn, lay down on the hay, took out the map. He looked at it, and froze. A new dot had appeared on the parchment. Red, bright, pulsating. A rescue type. A 0.001% chance. Coordinates, the forest north of Windmer. Distance, a 3-hour walk. Activation time, tonight. Rescue, not a discovery, not a rendezvous. Salvation. Someone in the forest north of the village needs help right now. With a 0.001% chance that help will arrive. Caden stood up. It was dark. It was cold. He was tired. His legs ached. His fingers were scraped raw. The body of a 17-year-old boy wasn't used to such exertion. But the word rescue glowed on the map. And Caden set out. Through the village, across the fields, into the forest. Alone, at night, with a 0.3 chance of success. He walked for 2 hours. The marker was getting closer. The forest was growing denser, darker. The sounds of the night all around him. Owls, the crackling of branches, a distant howl. Not a wolf, something else. The dot stopped. Caden emerged into a clearing, and he saw her. A woman, young, about 18, tied to a tree, hands behind her back, her mouth gagged with a rag, her clothes torn, her body covered in scrapes and bruises, a smoldering campfire on the ground nearby, footprints all around, lots of them, 5 pairs of boots, the same thugs. Caden understood everything instantly. Darian had hired them for Caden, but along the way they'd found someone else, or maybe she'd been with them from the very beginning. A captive, prey, entertainment during their rest stop. Caden ran up to the tree. He untied the ropes. He pulled the rag out of her mouth. The woman stared at him with wild eyes, green, fierce, not frightened, angry. She said one word, "Behind you." Caden spun around, a fist, darkness. He came to on the ground. His head was pounding. One of the bandits was standing over him, a burly one, with a sword. He was smirking. He said there was another lost soul, that only fools and the dead walk in the woods at night. And soon there would be both. Caden lay on the ground and counted. 1 bandit, the other 4 were gone, or asleep, or far away. He was alone, unarmed, luck 0.3, odds 0. But the woman was already free, and the woman was already moving, quickly, like a cat, like a shadow. The ropes he'd untied lay on the ground, but she held a rock in her hands. A big one, a sharp one. She struck the bandit from behind on the back of the head. He fell. She struck again. He stopped moving. Then she picked up his sword, checked the balance, swirled it in her hand. A professional's gesture, not a victim, a fighter. She turned to Caden, looked down at him. Green eyes, red hair, a scattering of scars on her arms. She was half a head taller than him. She asked who he was. Caden sat down. He touched the back of his head. A bump. Blood. It hurt. He replied that he was Caden Rowe from Windmer, luck 0.3. She snorted. She asked what he was doing in the woods at night with a luck of 0.3. He replied that he'd come to save her. She laughed, loudly, like a horse. That's exactly it. Rough and infectious. She said he'd saved her. He untied the ropes. She could have freed herself, but she didn't have time. They came by every hour to check on her. She was waiting for the right moment. He gave her that moment, so technically, he'd saved her.
technically. She held out her hand to him. She said her name was Madison Crow. Maddie. A mercenary. Boy 76's luck. Those 5 had intercepted her on the road 2 days ago. She was heading to Windmer, looking for work. They figured a lone girl would be easy prey. They were wrong. But there were 5 of them, and she was alone. They tied her up, dragged her along with them. They were going to sell her at the slave market beyond the pass. Caden took her hand. She pulled him to his feet in one swift motion. Strong. Very strong. Maddie looked at him, at his gaunt body, at his battered head, at his dirty clothes. She asked why he'd come. He replied that the map had shown him the way. She asked which map. He replied that it was his. She said he was strange. He agreed. They walked back through the forest, Maddie in front with her sword, Caden behind with a bump on the back of his head. She talked, a lot, fast, without pauses, about how she became a mercenary at 14, how her brother died in battle because a commander with an 85 luck rating fled at the first sign of casualties, how she stopped trusting numbers, how she travels alone because it's safer that way. Caden listened, and he thought that this woman was the perfect fit for the one variable he'd been missing. A bodyguard.
He wasn't a fighter. He'd never be a fighter. With a luck of 0.3, every sword strike had a chance of slipping and cutting him instead. He needed someone who would fight for him, someone with a combat luck of 76, someone who doesn't believe in numbers and therefore won't run away when she sees his 0.3. Maddie stopped. She turned to face him. She said that he had come into the forest alone at night, unarmed and with a luck of 0.3 to save a woman he didn't know. He's an idiot, or a madman, or the only honest person she'd met in 4 years as a mercenary. She took out her canteen, took a sip, held it out to him. Caden took it, took a sip, water with a hint of mint and something bitter. Maddie said the canteen was her ritual. She only shares it with those she trusts. In 4 years, there had been 2 such people. Both were dead. Caden was now the 3rd. She added, "Let's hope he doesn't die." The system flashed. Notification. Madison Crow. Favorability 20. Maddie ate as if she hadn't seen food in a week, which, in fact, was true. 2 days held captive by bandits. Before that, 3 days on the road living on crackers. She sat at the table in Hannah's house and devoured bowl after bowl of porridge. The 3rd. The 4th. Hannah's mother watched her with quiet horror and cooked up another batch. Hannah sat across from her and watched. A notebook lay on the table, open to a blank page. She hadn't written a single word yet. She was taking it all in. Maddie finished her 5th bowl and leaned back in her chair. She patted her stomach. She looked at Hannah. She said the food was excellent and that the herbalist cooked better than the cook at the East Pass garrison. Hannah smiled slightly. She wrote in her notebook, "Thank you." Maddie narrowed her eyes. She asked why she was writing instead of speaking. Hannah blushed. She wrote, "Habit." Maddie nodded and said that habits were a good thing. She had a habit too, to hit people who hurt those she cared about. And she cared about Hannah. Hannah blushed even more. Caden sat by the window, looking at the map. 4 days until the guild's arrival. The red dot hadn't appeared on the parchment yet. There were no green dots either. The map was silent. He thought about the guild, about the trial, about how Magister Ortonvale would arrive with a single purpose, to prove that Caden's finds were fakes. Not because they were fakes, but because acknowledging their authenticity would mean admitting that the luck assessment system was wrong. And if the system is wrong, then the guild loses its power. Its monopoly rests on a single assertion. High luck equals valuable finds. Low luck equals junk. Caden is shattering that assertion, and the guild will come to fix it. Maddie walked over and sat down next to him. She looked at the map. She asked what kind of parchment it was. Caden hesitated.
He hadn't told anyone about the map except Hannah, and even then, not everything. Hannah knew he found things. She didn't know how. Maddie looked at him calmly, green eyes, without pressure, without expectation. She just looked. Caden made up his mind. He told her about the map, about the dots that appear every morning, about the types of events, about the odds, about how the map only works when he's searching for others, about the cartographer of the impossible's system. Not everything, not about the tickets of fate, not about the luck exchange, but enough. Maddie listened. She didn't interrupt. When he finished, she was silent for a minute. Then she said she didn't care about the map. Caden blinked. She explained. Last night, he'd gone into the forest alone, unarmed, with a luck rating of 0.3, because the word salvation was glowing on the map. The map could have shown a trap. It could have shown nonsense. It could have been wrong. He went anyway. It wasn't the map that came to save her. It was him, a man without a weapon and without a chance. That's the only thing that matters. Caden didn't know what to say. In his past life, he'd been complimented twice, once by his boss for a report, once by his mother on the phone on his birthday, and even then she got his age wrong. He said thank you. Maddie snorted and told him not to thank her. She wasn't praising him, she was stating a fact. Then she added that if the map showed where to look, she needed to know where the enemies would be. Because if the guild arrived with security and she arrived with security, Maddie needed to know how many of them there were and from which direction to expect them. Caden looked at the map. The map showed discoveries, encounters, rescues, not threats. He couldn't use the map as an enemy radar, but the analyst's eye might work differently. He closed his eyes and thought. The Appraisers Guild, Master Orton Vale, arriving in 4 days. What's the probability he'll come alone? Low. The guild is an organization. Organizations send delegations. What's the probability he'll be accompanied by armed men? High. The guild controls the artifact market. The artifact market means money. Money needs protection. At least 2 bodyguards. At most 10. Most likely 4 or 5. What are the odds that the trial will be fair? Caden opened his eyes. 0. The trial won't be fair. The guild isn't coming to judge. The guild is coming to hand down a sentence. The decision has already been made. All that's left is to make it official. So playing by their rules is pointless. He needed to change the rules. He needed to do what an analyst does best. Find a weak spot in the system and strike there. For the next 3 days, Caden prepared. He wasn't looking for artifacts. He was looking for information. Hannah was his source. She knew the village. She knew the people. She knew the rumors. She told him that Magister Ortonvale had come to Windmer 12 years ago. Back then, he wasn't yet a magister, but a junior appraiser. He lived in the village for 3 months. He was conducting research. He was studying the effect of low luck on crop quality. Then he left and never returned. Caden asked why a junior assessor would live in a backwater village for 3 months. Hannah didn't know, but her mother did. Hannah's mother told the story quietly and reluctantly. 12 years ago, the young assessor Ortonvale lived in Windmer and was seeing a local girl, an herbalist. Young, beautiful, lucky 12. They were together for 3 months. Then he left. 7 months later, the girl gave birth to a daughter. The appraiser didn't return. He didn't write. He didn't send any money. The girl raised her daughter alone. She named her Hannah. Caden looked at Hannah. Hannah was standing by the door. Her face was pale. Her eyes were wide. She didn't know. Her mother had never told her. Hannah turned and walked out. Caden wanted to follow her, but Hannah's mother stopped him. She said Hannah needed time, that she'd be okay, that she was strong, stronger than she thought. Caden nodded. And he thought that he'd just acquired a weapon that could overturn the guild's judgment. Master Orton Vale, head of the Regional Appraisers Guild, has an illegitimate daughter in the village of Windmer. A daughter he abandoned, a mother he left behind. This isn't blackmail, it's a fact. And this fact means that Orton has a personal interest in Windmer, a personal interest he's hiding, a personal interest that makes his judgment biased by definition. In his old world, this was called a conflict of interest, and its grounds for recusal. Caden spent the next 2 days gathering evidence. Hannah's mother gave him a letter, the one and only one Orton had written before leaving. In it, he promised to return. He didn't return. It bore his signature. The guild's seal was stamped on it, an official document. Maddie was training. Every morning she would go into the woods and return drenched in sweat, her fists raw. She was punching trees. She said that was how she was preparing. Caden asked what for. She replied, "For the inevitable." People with high luck are used to winning. When they lose, they don't accept defeat. They strike back. And she had to be ready to strike back. Hannah returned a day later, silently, with red eyes. She sat down next to Caden, opened her notebook, wrote, "I'm ready." Caden asked what for. She wrote, "For everything." The morning of the trial, the 4th day. The guild arrived at dawn. 3 wagons, Master Orton Vale in the first, tall, gray-haired, a face carved from stone, eyes gray and cold, dressed in black with a golden seal on his chest. With him were 4 guards, 2 assistants, and 1 scribe. 8 people. Maddie's estimate had been close. The trial was held in the square. Gwen provided a chair and a table. Orton sat down. The assistants laid out the papers. The scribe prepared his quill. The village gathered. A little over 100 people in all. Darian was in the front row. Leah was next to him. Caden stood alone in front of the table. Hannah and Maddie stood behind him. 3 people against the guild. Orton began. His voice was steady, emotionless. He read the charges. Caden Rowe, Luck 0.3, is accused of artifact fraud. Helian's Fang and the Cup of Fortune are hereby declared items of dubious origin pending the completion of the guild's examination. For the duration of the investigation, Caden Rowe is prohibited from leaving Windmer. Any attempt to flee will result in arrest and transfer to the mines. The crowd was silent. Caden was silent. Orton asked if the defendant pleaded guilty. Caden said no. He added that he was requesting the judge's recusal on the grounds of a conflict of interest. Orton raised an eyebrow. He asked what conflict. Caden said that Magister Orton Vale had lived in Windmer for 3 months 12 years ago. During that time, he had been in a personal relationship with a villager. That this relationship resulted in a child. That the presence of an illegitimate child in the village where the trial is being held makes the judge a party with a personal interest. And that, according to Guild Regulations, Section 14, Subsection 3, a judge with a personal interest is required to transfer the case to another magister. Silence. Absolute silence. Even the wind had fallen still. Orton looked at Caden. His expression didn't change, his eyes didn't flicker, but his fingers clenched on the table. For a single second, Caden noticed. An analyst always notices. Orton asked where this information came from. Caden took out a letter. He placed it on the table. Orton looked at the letter, at his own signature, at the guild's seal. The assistants exchanged glances. The scribe stopped writing. Orton was silent for 10 seconds, 20, 30. Then he stood up. He said that the trial was postponed indefinitely, that the case would be transferred to the guild's capital branch, that, pending the capital's decision, all restrictions on Caden Rowe were lifted. He turned around and walked toward the wagon, without looking back. Darian stood in the crowd with his mouth agape. His plan had collapsed. The guild, which he had summoned as a weapon against Caden, had turned around and left, without winning, without punishing him, just driving away. Because a kid with a luck rating of 0.3 had found a weak spot in the system and struck right there. Maddie walked up to Caden. She slapped him on the back so hard he almost fell over. She said it was beautiful. Hannah approached quietly. She wrote a single word in her notebook. Father, with a question mark. No, without a question mark. Just father, and a period. Caden looked at her. He said he'd found out yesterday that he hadn't wanted to use it without her permission, but there was no other way. Hannah looked at him for a long time. Then she wrote, "I know. You did the right thing." And she went to her mother. Caden stood in the square and watched as dust from the guild's wagons settled on the road. The first battle was won. Not with a sword, not with magic, not with luck. With data, with paper, with logic. Just like in the old world. But the war is only just beginning. The Capital Guild isn't a regional magister, it's a machine. And that machine will arrive with tools far more formidable than a single letter. The 2 weeks following the Guild's departure passed quietly. Too quietly. Caden knew that the calm before the storm wasn't a metaphor, but a statistical pattern, a period of low activity preceding a sharp spike. He'd seen it in insurance data, a month without accidents, followed by 3 major ones in a single week. The system wasn't flagging any major incidents. Minor incidents every day. Lost items, rare herbs, the nest of a songbird the farmer's daughter had been looking for. Caden walked through the village and returned to people what they had lost, or found what they didn't know they needed. Windmer was getting used to him. Didn't like him, wasn't afraid of him, just getting used to him. The way you get used to the weather. 0 is 0. He's strange, but he's useful. Let him wander. Darian had gone quiet. He didn't come around. He didn't make threats. He didn't shoot arrows at the windows. That worried Caden more than the threats. A quiet Darian meant a planning Darian, and a planner with a luck of 91 is more dangerous than an armed man. On the 10th day of silence, the map showed a new marker. Not in Windmer, far away, in the regional capital, the city of Altera. A 3-day journey. A red marker, bright, a find. Probability 0.00002%. The Diary of Coincidences highlighted the information. The crown of the first queen. An artifact of the first era. Legendary rank. Lost 800 years ago. Last known location, the Hall of Judgment in Altera. Caden reread it. The Hall of Judgment in Altera. The place where the Guild had forwarded his case. The place where the capital's magisters would decide his fate. And beneath that place lies the crown of the first queen. 800 years. A coincidence? Or not? The system doesn't believe in coincidences. Neither does Caden. He assembled a team. Hannah, Maddie. Just the 2 of them. Not many, but enough. They set out at dawn. Maddie led the way with the sword she'd taken from a bandit. Hannah walked beside Caden, carrying a basket of herbs and a notebook. Caden held the map. A 3-day journey. Through forests, through fields, across 2 bridges and 1 ford. Maddie walked with ease, a mercenary's habit. 30 kilometers a day was a walk in the park for her. Hannah walked more slowly. She had never left Windmer. Every new landscape made her stop and jot something down in her notebook. Names of herbs, soil types, wind direction. She catalogued the world around her just as Caden catalogued probabilities. 2 analysts, different tools, 1 habit. On the 2nd day of their journey, they encountered a caravan. 5 wagons, merchants. They were heading to Alter for the fair. Maddie arranged for a ride in exchange for guarding the caravan. Caden sat in the wagon and thought about the trial. The Capital Guild isn't Orton Vale. There's no conflict of interest there that can be exposed. There are no personal secrets there that could be exploited. It's pure bureaucracy. Paperwork, protocols, regulations. A machine that grinds people down not out of malice, but out of habit. He needed a different plan. Not compromising evidence, not blackmail. Something that would strike not at the people, but at the system. He closed his eyes and activated the analyst's eye. He began weighing his options. The court in Altera, the Hall of Justice. Beneath the hall lay the crown of the first queen. Rank, legendary. 800 years under the floor. Why under the floor? Because Altera's Hall of Justice was built on the ruins of the first palace. Every schoolchild in Erelen knows that. The Diary of Coincidences told the rest. The first palace belonged to the first queen. She ruled before the law of luck came into being, before the crystal balls, before the numbers, before everything. Her crown was hidden when the new order overthrew the old one, hidden beneath her own palace, beneath the new courthouse that was built on top of it. Symbolic. The new law stands on the bones of the old. And beneath every judge's feet lies proof that the world was once different, that luck wasn't always the law,
that people once lived without numbers hanging over their heads. Caden smiled. The plan was coming together.
Altera met them on the third day. A city 20 times larger than Windmer, stone walls, markets, guild houses with golden seals on their facades, streets full of people, noise, the smells of food, sweat, and metal. Hannah stopped at the gate, her mouth agape. She'd never seen so many people in one place. Maddie walked through the gate without slowing her pace. She'd been to bigger cities. For her, Altera was just a job. Caden looked at the city through the eyes of an analyst. He was calculating. The population was roughly 15,000, judging by the density of the buildings. 3 guild houses meant 3 monopolies. 2 temples meant 2 religious denominations. 1 palace meant 1 ruling authority. There were 4 guards at the gates, armed with spears. The guard's rank is determined by their insignia. These 4 have blue insignia. Their rank is between 40 and 60. Average rank, not the elite. The trial was scheduled for 2 days later. There was time. Caden spent those 2 days studying the courtroom, from the outside, all around it.
According to records in the city archives, which Hannah accessed while posing as a herbalist student gathering data for her dissertation. Her notebook came in handy. The librarian didn't suspect a thing. A girl with a notebook who sits quietly and reads is the most harmless creature in any world. Hannah found the blueprints. The Hall of Judgment of Altera. Built 600 years ago on the foundation of the first palace. The basement exists but is walled off. The entrance was sealed with stone during construction. No one has gone down there in 600 years. Because no one knew there was anything down there. Caden knew. The map knew. And the map showed the exact entrance. Not through the walled-up door, through the floor, through a crack between the slabs beneath the judge's throne. The slabs were laid 600 years ago. Over 600 years, the stone has settled. The cracks have widened. Enough to slip a hand through, if you know where to look. Judgment Day. The hall is full. 3 magistrates at the table. Not just 1 like Orton. 3. The highest court. Golden robes, crystal skeepers. Faces as hard as stone. Indifferent. A machine. On both sides of the hall, benches for spectators. Full. Caden's case had become well known. The boy with a luck rating of 0.3 who finds legendary artifacts. Rumors had reached Altera before he did. People had come to watch. Caden stood before the table. Hannah and Maddie stood behind him. Maddie had a sword at her belt. The court guards glanced their way but did not intervene. A licensed mercenary has the right to carry a weapon. Maddie had presented her license that morning, an old, worn-out one, but still valid. The chief magistrate read the case. Caden Rowe, luck 0.3, from the village of Windmer. 2 legendary rank finds in 2 days. According to guild statistics, the probability of such an event for a person with a luck rating of 0.3 is 1 in 47 billion. Conclusion: fraud. Sentence: confiscation of the artifacts. Penalty: 10 years of hard labor in the mines. Caden listened to the verdict while counting the floor tiles. 32 from the entrance to the judge's table. The tile under the table's right leg was shifted 2 centimeters to the left. The gap between it and the adjacent tile was 3 centimeters wide. That was enough. The magistrate asked if the defendant had anything to say. Caden said yes. He asked for 1 minute. The magistrate nodded. Caden approached the judge's bench. He knelt down. The guards tensed.
Maddie placed her hand on the hilt of her sword. Caden slipped his hand into the gap between the tiles. Up to his elbow, his fingers touched something cold, round, metallic. He pulled. There was a grinding sound. The slab shifted. And from beneath the floor of Altera's Court of Justice, Caden Rowe retrieved a crown, a golden one, set with rubies, with a rune on the rim that every person in this world recognized. The rune of the first queen. The woman who had ruled before the law of luck, whose reign had been overthrown, whose palace had become the foundation for the court that was now judging a boy with zero luck. The hall fell silent. The three magistrates turned pale. The scribe dropped his quill. The guards froze. The 500 spectators in the stands held their breath. The system lit up. An artifact detected. The crown of the first queen. Legendary rank. Lost 800 years ago. Discovered beneath the floor of Altera's courtroom. Right under the feet of those who had been judging people by numbers for 800 years. Right under the feet of those who had declared him a fraud. Caden placed the crown on the judge's table. He looked at the chief magistrate and said quietly, "The probability of finding 3 legendary artifacts in a month for a person with a luck rating of 0.3 is 1 in 47 billion. But here it is, on your table, the third one, from under your floor. Either I am the greatest fraudster in history, or your statistics are wrong. And if your statistics are wrong in my case, then in how many other cases have they been wrong? How many people are sitting in the mines because your numbers said they couldn't do it?" Silence. The chief magistrate looked at the crown, at Caden, at the crown, at Caden. Then he stood up. He called a recess. He left the hall. The other 2 magistrates followed him. The hall erupted in noise. People were shouting, arguing. Some were crying. Maddie stood with her sword drawn. The guards didn't move. They didn't know what to do. They'd been trained to apprehend criminals. No one had trained them to apprehend a person who just found a relic under the floor of their own ship. An hour later, the magistrates returned. The chief magistrate read the verdict. On the way back from Altera, Caden remained silent. Maddie led the group along the road. Hannah walked beside her, noting the types of plants growing along the roadside. Caden brought up the rear, lost in thought. 2,000 gold pieces in his bag. 3 legendary artifacts in 3 weeks. The trial was won. The village was saved. By this world's standards, he had already achieved the impossible. But the analyst in him saw not achievements, but trends, and the trends were alarming. The guild had retreated, but not surrendered. The revision of the evaluation methods was a formality, a line in the minutes that could be buried in bureaucracy within a month. Ortonvale learned that he has a daughter in Windmer. It's unclear how he'll react. Darien has been quiet for 2 weeks now. For a man with a luck of 91 and the temperament of a bull, this is unnatural. And most importantly, that night, by the campfire in front of Altera, Caden woke up to the sensation of someone's gaze. He saw no one, but on the ground next to his head lay an object. Small. Bronze. A key. An old one. With runes. The key vanished when Caden blinked, as if it had never been there, but the sensation remained. Someone is watching. Someone is checking. Someone is deciding whether Caden is worth their attention. The Order of the 1,000 Keys. Caden knew about them from the Diary of Coincidences. A cult, a shadowy organization. They've existed for 1,000 years. They were the ones who hid the artifacts of the First Age across the continent. Their goal is unknown. Their methods are unknown. Their numbers are unknown. The only thing the system revealed was a symbol, a key, and a phrase. They're looking for the cartographer. Caden pushed that thought aside. One problem at a time. Right now, the priority was to return to Windmer, distribute the gold, prepare for the next step. They returned on the 4th day. The village greeted them strangely. No one came out to meet them. The streets were empty. The doors were shut. Silence. Maddie stopped. She put her hand on her sword. She said she didn't like this. Caden looked around. The square was empty. The market was closed. The shutters were drawn. But smoke was rising from the chimneys. That meant people were home. That meant they were hiding. So they're afraid. They reached Hannah's house. Hannah's mother was standing at the door, pale. Her eyes were red. She spoke quickly and quietly.
Darian brought people, not bandits, a recruiter from the Academy of the Five Blades. The recruiter arrived this morning. He announced that the village of Windmer would receive one spot at the academy. The competitive selection process would take place in a month. Darian had already submitted his application, and he declared that if anyone from the village tried to apply against him, he would make sure they'd regret it. Caden listened and thought. The Academy of the Five Blades. The best educational institution in Erlin. It trains heroes, artifact hunters, future leaders. Getting into the academy means leaving the village behind and reaching the level of the kingdom. It's the next step. Without the academy, Caden will remain a village legend. With the academy, he'll become a player on the continental stage. Darian understands this, and that's exactly why he's blocking his path. Caden asked what the selection process entailed. Hannah's mother replied, 3 trials: combat, search, strategy. Combat is a direct confrontation in the arena. Search involves finding a hidden object in the forest within a limited time. Strategy is solving a tactical problem in front of the judges. 3 disciplines, 3 scores. The passing score is 70. Caden ran the numbers. Combat. He's not a fighter. With a luck score of 0.3, every strike is a risk. His chances in direct combat are close to 0. Search. His territory. A map. The analyst's eye. Here he can score the maximum. Strategy. A data analyst from the insurance industry. Probabilities, calculations, modeling. Also his territory. 2 out of 3. If he scores the maximum in search and strategy, he could fail combat and still pass, provided the total exceeds 70. He needs information. What's the scoring system? What is the weighting for each discipline? What are the rules? What are the restrictions? Caden went to see the recruiter. He found him in the village head's house, a young man in his 30s, military bearing. Combat luck 68, judging by his patch. Not outstanding, but sufficient for a recruiter. Caden asked about the selection rules. The recruiter looked at him, at his skinny body, at his dirty clothes, at the 0.3 insignia that Caden didn't wear, but which hung over him like an invisible brand. The recruiter said that each test is scored on a scale of 0 to 100. The passing score is a total of 210 out of 300. The average was 70. The weighting was the same for all 3 disciplines. Combat took place in the academy's arena. The search took place in the forest near the academy. Strategy was assessed in the hall before a panel of 3 instructors. Caden asked if the village could submit more than 1 applicant. The recruiter said no. 1 spot, 1 candidate. But if 2 people apply, the village holds an internal selection process. The village elder sets the rules for the internal selection. Caden nodded. He went to see Gwen. The village elder was sitting in her house and looked like someone who hadn't slept for 3 days. She saw Caden and sighed. She said she knew why he had come. That Darian had come too. That Darian had threatened that if she gave the spot to Caden, he'd tell the whole region that Gwen had helped a fraudster. That Gwen believed in forgeries. That Gwen was untrustworthy as a village head. Blackmail. Again. Caden sat down across from her. He looked her in the eyes. And he said that blackmail only works if the victim fears exposure. If Gwen announced an internal selection process and conducted it fairly, she would have nothing to fear. A fair selection means whoever is better gets the spot. If Darian is better, he'll win, and Caden will accept it. If Caden is better, then Darian will accept it. Or not, but that's his problem. Gwen was silent. She thought for a moment. Then she asked what format of selection Caden was proposing. He replied, "The same as at the academy. 3 disciplines: combat, search, and strategy. The judges will be villagers.
Open voting. No behind-the-scenes decisions. Gwen nodded. She agreed. She announced an internal selection process in 5 days. Caden walked out and ran into Darian on the porch. His brother stood with his arms crossed. His face was calm. His eyes were angry. He said he'd been expecting this, that Caden would enter the selection process, that it was a good thing, because in the arena there are no maps, no swamp toads, and no tricks. In the arena, there's a sword and an opponent. And with Darian's luck at 91 against Caden's at 0.3, it's not a fight, it's an execution. Caden replied, "We'll see." Darian smirked and walked away. 5 days. Caden spent them preparing. Not for the fight. It's pointless to prepare for a fight. 5 days won't turn an analyst into a fighter. He was preparing for the search and the strategy. He discussed battle tactics with Maddie. Not how to win, how to hold out. How not to lose right away. How to make the fight last long enough to score at least a few points. Maddie said that with his luck, any strike could slip and maim him. Direct combat is impossible. His only chance is to dodge. Don't attack, move, get away. Keep your opponent at bay. Maddie taught him how to move. 3 hours a day. Caden fell, got up, fell, got up. By the end of the 5th day, he'd learned to dodge a direct blow 6 times out of 10. Not brilliant, but better than nothing. He hadn't prepared for the search. The map would handle everything on its own. All he had to do was find the object they'd hide for the test. The map would find it. This was his territory. He hadn't prepared for the strategy either. That was what he'd been doing his whole life. 24 years of data analysis, thousands of reports, millions of probabilities. If the jury gives him a problem involving logic and calculation, he'll solve it faster than they can even formulate it. Selection Day, Windmer Square, the whole village. A recruiter from the academy watches from a bench in the distance. Gwen stands in the center as the judge. 2 of the 3 stages will take place today, combat and strategy. The search is tomorrow morning. First stage, combat. The arena is marked off with chalk on the square, a circle 10 meters in diameter. Stepping outside the circle means defeat. Darian entered first, sword in hand, wearing light leather armor, a smile on his face. He looked like a man who had come for a guaranteed victory. Caden entered second, no sword, no armor. Maddie had given him a wooden staff, not a weapon, a stick for balance. The crowd murmured. Someone laughed. 0 against 91, with a stick. Gwen gave the signal. Darian attacked immediately, quickly, powerfully. The sword whistled through the air. Caden dodged to the right, just as Maddie had taught him. Not elegantly, he stumbled, but he dodged. Darian spun around, struck again. Caden dodged to the left, fell, rolled, got back up. Darian pressed forward, strike after strike. Caden dodged, fell, got up. Dodged, fell, got up. 30 seconds. A minute. 2. Darian started to get angry. He was used to landing a hit on the first strike. A luck of 91 meant the blade went exactly where he wanted it to. But Caden wasn't standing still. He was moving, chaotically, unpredictably. With a luck of 0.3, his movements defied logic. He didn't dodge correctly. He stumbled in the right direction. He fell at the right moment. His clumsiness was his defense, because it's impossible to predict the movements of a person who doesn't even know where he'll fall. By the 3rd minute, Darian lost his patience. He lunged forward, a wide swing, his whole body behind the strike. Caden crouched. The sword sailed over his head. Caden jabbed his pole at Darian's leg. Not hard, but hard enough. Darian stumbled. He took a step back, another step. 1 foot crossed the chalk line. The crowd gasped. Gwen raised her hand. Foul. A warning. Not stepping out of the circle, since only 1 foot was over it, but a warning nonetheless. Darian looked down, at the line, at his foot, at Caden, who stood before him, dirty, sweaty, and holding a stick. And in Darian's eyes, Caden saw something that had never been there before.
Doubt. The fight continued for another 4 minutes. Darian won. Of course. He knocked the staff out of Caden's hands with a sword strike and pinned him to the ground. But it took him 7 minutes. 7 minutes against an unarmed boy with a luck rating of 0.3. The crowd's score? Darian 78, Caden 34. Caden lost the fight, but he scored 34, not 0. Stage 2. Strategy. Gwen read the challenge. The village is under attack by bandits from 2 sides. 20 bandits from the west, 10 from the east. There are 30 men in the village capable of bearing arms. The bandits' average luck is 45. The villagers' average luck is 25. How to organize the defense? Darian answered first, quickly and confidently. 20 men to the west, 10 to the east, a 1-to-1 ratio. Attack on the move before the enemy can establish a foothold. Use the advantage of knowing the terrain. Simple, head-on, military style. Caden was the second to respond. He spoke for 3 minutes, without pauses, citing numbers. 30 bandits with a combined luck of 45 means their chance of hitting the target is 45%. 30 villagers with a luck of 25 means a 25% chance of hitting. In a head-on clash, the villagers' casualties would be 60%. The bandits' losses would be 35%. The villagers would lose. An alternative: don't split forces. All 30 men head west. Leave the eastern flank open, but mind the approaches from the east with simple traps, pits, ropes, logs on the slope. Traps don't require luck, they require physics. A pit is a pit, regardless of luck. 10 bandits coming from the east will lose 40% of their numbers to the traps even before contact. 30 villagers against 20 bandits in the west, with a 3-to-1 numerical advantage, will compensate for the difference in luck. The villagers' chance of victory is 73% instead of 28. The crowd fell silent. A recruiter from a distant bench leaned forward. Crowd ratings: Darian 55, Caden 89. Caden won the strategy round by a landslide. Total after 2 stages: Darian 133, Caden 123. A 10-point gap. Tomorrow is the search. Caden must outscore Darian by at least 11 points in the search to advance. He smiled. The search is his territory. The morning of the search was foggy. The forest east of Windmer stood shrouded in a whitish haze, like the backdrop to a nightmare. Gwen explained the rules. An object was hidden in the forest, a medallion bearing the Windmer rune. Whoever found it first would receive 100 points. The second-place finisher would get 0. They had 1 hour. The area stretched from the edge of the forest to the stream, a square roughly 2 by 2 kilometers. 4 square kilometers of forest, 1 medallion, 1 hour. Darian stood at the starting line, rolling his shoulders. His finding luck wasn't 91. That was fate luck. Darian's finding luck was 54. Average, nothing outstanding, but 180 times greater than Caden's 0.3. By the logic of this world, Darian should find the medallion faster. By Caden's logic, the world is wrong. Gwen gave the signal. Both entered the forest. Darian darted to the right, quickly, confidently. He knew this forest. He'd played here since childhood, ran, climbed trees, every path was familiar. Caden went straight ahead, slowly. He took out the map, looked at it. Nothing. No red dots, no green ones. The map was silent. Caden stopped, thought. The map wasn't showing the medallion. Why? Because the medallion isn't an artifact. It isn't a relic. It isn't a lost item. It's an object hidden specifically for a test. The map marks impossible events. Finding a hidden object under controlled conditions isn't an impossible event. It's a task. An ordinary task with an ordinary solution. The map won't help. Caden stood among the trees and, for the first time since arriving in this world, felt that the system had let him down. No, it hadn't. He had misunderstood the rules. The map works for the impossible. A medallion in the forest is possible.
For that, he needed a different tool. The analyst's eye. Caden closed his eyes. He activated the skill. He began to calculate. Who hid the medallion? Gwen. When? Last night. Gwen is a 50-year-old woman, not athletic, doesn't like to walk far. So the medallion isn't hidden deep in the woods, closer to the edge, within a 500-meter radius of the entrance. Gwen is right-handed. Right-handed people intuitively turn right, so the locket is hidden on the right side of the forest. Darian ran to the right. Gwen is his aunt. She knows his habits. If she hid the locket knowing that Darian would run to the right, she might have hidden it there specifically so her nephew would find it first. Or the opposite. She hid it on the left to make it seem fair. Caden thought more deeply. Gwen had changed after the incident with the chalice. She had come to trust Caden. She'd given him the ticket of destiny. Twice. But Darian was her nephew. Blood. Which would win out? Trust or blood? The answer? A compromise. Gwen would hide the medallion in a place that gave neither of them an advantage. Not the right side of the forest, not the left. The center. The most neutral spot. Caden headed straight for the center of the forest. Through the windfall, through the bushes, branches lashed at his face. With a 0.3 chance, every branch hit his cheek. 20 minutes later, he emerged into a small clearing, in the center of the forest. A tree, big, old, with a hollow 2 meters up. A classic hiding spot. Too classic. Gwen is smarter than that. She wouldn't put the medallion in a hollow. That's the first place anyone would look. Caden looked around. The analyst's eye scanned the area. The clearing. Grass, rocks, a stump, an anthill. The soil around the anthill was fresh. Someone had been digging here last night. Not deep, just on the surface. Then they covered it back up. Footprints, size 37. Women's boots. The right foot steps heavier. Gwen limps on her left leg after breaking it 10 years ago, so she puts more weight on her right. It's her. Caden dug with his hands, quickly. The soil was soft, fresh. 5 centimeters, 10. His fingers touched metal. A medallion, bronze, with the Windmer rune. He pulled it out and raised it above his head. 31 minutes. He found the medallion in 31 minutes. Without a map, without magic, without luck. Pure analysis, profiling, deduction. Tools from a world where there are no crystal balls and no numbers floating above your head. Tools this world doesn't know, because why think when you can rely on luck? He emerged from the forest with the medallion in his hand. The crowd was waiting. Gwen saw the medallion and her eyes widened. Darian was still in the woods. The recruiter stood up from a bench in the distance. He walked over. He looked at the medallion. He looked at Caden. He asked how he'd found it. Caden replied that he'd calculated it. The recruiter didn't understand. Caden explained. Footprints, foot size, weight distribution, range of action, psychological profile of the person hiding it, zone of highest probability. The recruiter listened. His expression changed, from skepticism to surprise, from surprise to interest, from interest to something resembling admiration. He said that in 10 years on the job, not a single candidate had used such a method. Everyone relied on luck, on intuition, on speed. No one relied on analysis. Because in Erlen's world, analysis isn't a skill. It isn't part of the system. It can't be measured with a crystal ball. But it works. Darian emerged from the forest 40 minutes later, without the medallion. He saw it in Caden's hand. He stopped. His face was ashen. His lips were pressed together. He said that Caden had cheated, that he'd used a map, that it wasn't fair. The recruiter turned to him. He asked, "What map?" Darian hesitated. He couldn't explain about the map without admitting that he'd been following Caden, that he knew his secret, that he'd hired thugs to take that card away. He fell silent. Scores. Caden, 100. Darian, 0. Total. Darian, 133. Caden, 223. Caden passed with a total score of 223 out of 300. The passing score was 210. He passed by a margin of 13 points. The recruiter approached Caden. He handed him an envelope. He said that the selection process for the Academy of the Five Blades would take place in 30 days. The envelope was an invitation. With it, he could bring 2 companions. Caden took the envelope. He looked at Hannah. He looked at Maddie. They both nodded. Without a moment's hesitation, Gwen announced the result. The crowd reacted in different ways. Some clapped. Others remained silent. Still others shook their heads. A boy with a luck score of 0.3 was going to the Five Blades Academy. It was as if a blind man had won an archery championship. Impossible. But it had happened. Darian stood at the edge of the square. Leah was beside him. She wasn't holding his hand. She stood half a step away, a small distance, a huge one by the couple standards. Darian turned and walked away, without saying a word. Leah remained standing there. She watched him go. Then she looked at Caden. Their eyes met, for a second. Caden looked away first, not because he had nothing to say, because he already knew that Leah chose based on numbers. Today, his number was higher than Darian's, but he didn't want to be chosen based on a number. He wanted to be chosen as a person. Hannah was standing nearby. She didn't see that exchange of glances. She was writing in her notebook. She was finishing her entry for the day, the last sentence. Caden is going to the academy. I'm going with him. Maddie stood a little further away. She was cleaning her nails with the tip of a knife. She wasn't writing or watching. She was smiling, quietly, to herself, like someone who had finally found the place where she wanted to be. There were 3 weeks left before they left for the academy. Caden spent the first week taking care of village affairs. He distributed part of the gold from the crown reward, 200 gold pieces for roof repairs, 100 for seeds, 50 for tools for the blacksmith shop, 50 for medicine. He set aside the rest for the journey and for the first few months at the academy. Hannah and Maddie didn't ask where the money was going. They could see for themselves. The roofs were being repaired. Seeds were being bought. The blacksmith shop was up and running. The village was coming back to life. Not because of magic, but because of the gold found by a boy with a luck of 0.3. The dryad seed under Hannah's window had sprouted. Within a week, the slender green stem had grown half a meter tall. Its leaves were silvery. The trunk was white as bone. Hannah's mother sat by the window every day and watched the sprout. She wasn't coughing anymore. Her complexion was normal. Her strength was returning. She said the healing tree smelled like rain after a thunderstorm. Pure, fresh, alive. Hannah jotted this down in her notebook. In the second week, Caden began preparing for the academy. Not for the tryouts, for the academy itself. He needed information. Maddie knew a little. She'd heard about the Five Blades from mercenaries in taverns. The best martial arts school on the continent. 5 faculties. The Blade of Fire for fighters. The Blade of Wind for scouts. The Blade of Earth for strategists. The Blade of Water for diplomats. The Blade of Steel for crafters and engineers. Every student chooses a faculty upon admission. The program lasts 2 years. Graduates receive a rank and a license as artifact hunters. Maddie said that the Blade of Fire is the most prestigious. That's where everyone with high combat luck goes. Caden said he'd go to the Blade of Earth, strategy, his territory. Maddie said that the Blade of Earth is considered the faculty for those who lack the luck to get into the other 4. For weaklings and nerds. Caden replied that that suited him just fine. Hannah said she wanted to go with him, not to the academy. She doesn't have an invitation, but to the capital. The academy has a library, the largest on the continent. She needs books on alchemy, on rare herbs, and on diseases that kill people with low luck, diseases that no one treats because the patients are too cheap for expensive medicines. Caden nodded. He'd find a way to get Hannah into the library. There was one detail he noticed but didn't mention. Hannah said she wanted to go with him, not with them, with him, singular. He noticed. She didn't correct herself. 2 things happened during the 3rd week. First, Darian disappeared. He left Winmer at night, without saying goodbye. He took his things. He took the money from under the floorboards of his parents' house. He left a note.
One word. I'll be back.
His mother cried. His father was silent. Leah stood at the gate and watched the road down which Darian had gone. Caden saw this from his shed. He didn't go over. He didn't offer comfort. He didn't rejoice. He simply took note. With a luck score of 91, Darian set out into the world, without a plan, without a team, driven by pure anger. That's dangerous. Not for Darian, for everyone who stands in his way, and for Caden, because Darian will return. The note didn't lie. The analyst knows. People with high self-esteem don't leave forever. They leave only to return stronger. The second incident happened on the last night before departure. Caden slept in the shed, out of habit. Maddie slept by the door, her habit. She didn't explain, she just spread a blanket by the entrance and lay across it. Caden woke up from the cold, a strange cold, not the kind you feel at night, an inner cold, as if something had frozen in his chest. He opened his eyes. A man was standing over him, tall, in a long hooded cloak. His face was hidden. On his chest was a bronze emblem, a key, an old one, with runes, just like the one that had vanished by the campfire on the road from Altera. Caden didn't move. Maddie was sleeping by the door. Or maybe she wasn't. Her hand rested on the hilt of her sword, but she wasn't moving, as if the air around them had grown thick, as if time had slowed down. The man in the cloak spoke, quietly. His voice was low and steady, emotionless, threatless. He said they had been waiting 1,000 years, that Caden was the 7th. The 6 before him had perished, not at the hands of enemies, at their own hands. They had been searching for themselves. The map had gone blind. They had gone blind, and they had died blind in the darkness. Caden listened. His heart was pounding, but his mind was working, calculating. The 7th. So the system has existed for 1,000 years. So 6 others received the map before him. So someone is choosing the bearers, purposefully, from another world. Analysts, people who calculate rather than feel, people who see data rather than miracles. Why? The man in the cloak said he wouldn't kill him, that the Order of the 1,000 Keys isn't the enemy, that they are guardians, that 1,000 years ago they hid 12 artifacts across the continent, not from people, for people, for whoever could gather them all, for the cartographer. Caden asked why. Why hide artifacts if the goal was for them to be found? The man replied that the artifacts weren't the goal. The artifacts were keys. 12 keys to 12 locks. When all 12 are gathered, a door will open. What door? The door to the heavenly temple. The place where the gods of Erlen established the law of fortune. The place where this law can be rewritten. Caden lay in the barn on a bed of hay, watching the masked man who told him that the entire system of the world is a prison, that the numbers above people's heads are shackles, that luck is not a gift, but a leash, and that the only way to remove the leash is to gather the 12 keys and enter the heavenly temple. The analyst inside Caden processed the information. If this is true, then everything he does takes on a new scale. Not a village, not a region, not a kingdom. The world. The whole world. If this is a lie, then standing before him is a cult leader who wants to use him. Probability of truth, unknown. Insufficient data. Probability of falsehood, unknown. Insufficient data. Conclusion. Continue gathering data. Do not trust. Do not dismiss. Observe. The man said one more thing. He said that soon Caden would meet a girl. A little girl. A mute girl. She is not human. She is an artifact. The 12th, the last, the heart of the world. The gods created her as a lock on the door. A living lock. One that feels. One that cries. One that waits. The Order has been searching for her for 1,000 years. They haven't found her. Because only the cartographer can find her. Only the one who seeks not for himself. The man fell silent. He looked at Caden, or so it seemed to Caden. His face was hidden beneath the hood. Then he said one last thing. "We won't take your map. We'll take you, when the time comes. You'll ask for it yourself." And he vanished. He didn't walk away, he vanished. The air quivered. The chill in her chest faded. Maddie shuddered and woke up. She jumped up, sword in hand. Her eyes were wild. She asked what had happened. Caden said nothing. Just a bad dream. Maddie stared at him for a long time. She didn't believe him, but she didn't press the issue. She lay back down.
A minute later, she began to snore.
Caden lay there staring at the ceiling. Moonlight glinted off the rotten floorboards, casting patterns across the room. 12 artifacts, 12 keys. The celestial temple. The law of fortune. The gods. Prison. Freedom. A girl who isn't a person but a castle. The scale of the task had grown by an order of magnitude, from the mundane to the divine. The analyst in him said, "Break it down into stages." The Academy of the Five Blades stood on a cliff above the Alden River. 5 towers, each in the color of its respective faculty. Red for fire, gray for wind, brown for earth, blue for water, black for steel. Between the towers lay a plaza paved with white stone. Hundreds of people filled the plaza. Cadets, instructors, servants, all wearing insignia, luck numbers on their chests like labels on merchandise. Caden walked across the plaza and counted. The cadets' average luck ranged from 55 to 75. A few were above 80. One had a 94 insignia. Tall, fair-haired. He stood at the center of the group like the sun at the center of a solar system. Orbits around him. The inner one for those above 70. The outer one for the rest. The caste system was at work here, too. Caden, with his 0.3 patch, entered this system like a stone thrown into a pond. Silence spread in concentric circles. People stared. They read his patch. They reread it. They didn't believe it. They reread it again. Someone laughed. Someone looked away. Someone pointed. It felt familiar, Windermere, on a grander scale. Only here there weren't 100 people, but 1,000, and each of them had luck dozens of times greater than his. Maddie walked beside him, his hand on his sword, his face calm. She'd seen worse. 4 years as a mercenary had taught her to ignore other people's stares. Hannah walked on the other side, her notebook pressed against her chest like a shield. She noticed every glance, every snicker, every pointing finger, but she didn't stop. Registration went quickly. Caden enrolled in the Blade of the Earth program. As his escort, Maddie received a temporary pass and access to the barracks. Hannah received a pass to the library. Caden had asked for it. The librarian looked at his patch and asked why someone with a luck rating of 0.3 would need books. Caden replied that they were for his friend. The librarian looked at Hannah. Hannah showed her notebook, blank pages waiting to be filled with information. The librarian shrugged and handed over the pass. The first day at the academy was spent in orientation. The Earthblade instructor was Captain Vera Stone, a woman in her 40s. Tough, straightforward. Luck, 71. Average for an instructor. But she wasn't here for luck. She was here for brains. She looked at Caden, at his patch. She said that at Earth's Blade, luck isn't what matters. What matters is your brain. If your brain is empty, a luck of 90 won't help. If your brain is working, a luck of 0.3 won't hurt. The first person at the academy who didn't laugh. Caden remembered. On the 3rd day, he met Laureline Ashfield. She was standing by the fountain in the square, 16 years old, golden hair, blue eyes, posture like a statue. Insignia 88, luck of discovery, blade of the wind, reconnaissance. She was surrounded by an entourage, 4 cadets with insignia above 70. They looked at her as if she were a precious gem. She looked at them as if they were furniture. Laureline spotted Caden. She read his insignia. She raised an eyebrow. She approached. Her entourage followed. She said she'd heard of him.
The boy with a luck rating of 0.3 who found 3 legendary items. She added that 0.3 isn't a person, it's a statistical error. Caden replied that statistical errors sometimes turn the statistics on their head. Lori smiled, coldly, beautifully, like a crack in the ice. She said her father, Duke Ashfield, was dying, an illness that no healer can cure. The only remedy is the tear of the unicorn. The chance of finding it is 0.0002%. 40 expeditions have been sent out over the past year, all returned empty-handed. She didn't say it as a request, as a fact, as a test. If you're so special, prove it. Caden looked at the map, silently, unnoticed. There were no dots. Because he wasn't thinking about the Duke of Ashfield. He was thinking about Lori, about her cold eyes, about her contempt, about how she looked down on him. Ego. The map doesn't work on ego. He closed his eyes. He switched gears. He thought not of Lori, but of her father, of a man he didn't know, of a man lying in bed, gasping for breath, whose daughter stood before a stranger, begging for help without knowing how to ask, who might have only a few days left. He opened his eyes, looked at the map, a red dot, a find, a 0.0002% chance. Coordinates, the Academy's Market Square, 300 meters from here. Caden told Lori he'd find the tear, in 3 days. Lori looked at him with an expression he'd seen before, at Hannah's in the swamp. The face of someone who doesn't believe it, but is afraid not to believe it. She nodded and left. Her entourage followed her. For 3 days, Caden searched. The map led him not to the forest, not to a cave, not to a temple, to the market, to a beggar. An old man in rags sat against a wall with a bowl for coins. Next to him was a knapsack, dirty, tattered. Inside were rags and crackers, and a small vial. Glass, containing a liquid resembling molten silver. The system highlighted it. Unicorn tier. Legendary rank. Drop rate 0.0002%. Discovered in a beggar's knapsack in the market square of the Academy of the Five Blades. Caden sat down next to the beggar. He asked where the vial came from. The old man looked at him with cloudy eyes. He said he'd found it on the road. About 10 years ago. He thought it was perfume. He sniffed it. It wasn't perfume. It seemed a shame to throw it away. He's been carrying it with him. For 10 years. A unicorn's tear in a beggar's knapsack. 10 years. 40 expeditions had searched the forest and mountains for it. And there it lay, next to some crackers in a dirty bag, 300 meters from the academy where the continent's finest artifact hunters are trained. Caden bought the vial for 10 gold pieces. The beggar received more money than he'd ever seen in his entire life. Caden took the tear to Lori. She was standing by the fountain, alone, without an entourage. Her eyes were red. A month at the academy flew by like a week. Caden studied, not swordplay, not magic, strategy. Captain Vera kept the cadets of the Blade of the Earth busy with assignments from dawn to dusk, simulating sieges, calculating supplies, probabilities of outcomes with different troop numbers. For Caden, it was an advanced training course. For the other cadets, it was torture. They were used to relying on luck. Roll the dice and hope for the best. Caden rolled the dice knowing exactly which side would come up. Not because of luck, because he calculated the angles and the speed of rotation. Vera noticed. In the 3rd week, she called him in after class. She said his approach was unusual, that no one in the history of the Blade of the Earth had ever solved problems using probabilistic modeling. Everyone had relied on intuition and experience. Caden solved them using numbers. She asked where he'd learned that. Caden replied, "From books." Vera didn't believe him, but she didn't press the issue. She said that in a month, the tournament of the 5 Blades would take place, an annual competition between the faculties. The Blade of the Earth hadn't won in 14 years running. Everyone considers the strategist to be the weak link. She wants Caden to participate. Caden agreed. Meanwhile, Hannah was living in the library, literally. She'd wake up at dawn and head for the bookshelves. She'd return after dark. Her notebook was bursting with notes. She was studying alchemy.
rare diseases, herbs not found in Windmer, recipes no one had brewed in centuries. The librarian had gotten used to her. He started leaving tea on her desk in the mornings. One day, Hannah found an entry, an old one, in the archives section. The Appraisers Guild birth registry from 30 years ago. A name in the registry, Orton Vale, Junior Appraiser. Assignment, Windmer.
Purpose of research. Personal note.
Daughter, name not listed. Status, unacknowledged. Hannah stood in front of the book and stared at the line. Daughter, not recognized. Her father knew about her. He recorded it and crossed it out. Not from the book, from life. She closed the book, returned to the table, opened her notebook, wrote one word, no, and turned the page. She would not be his daughter. She is her mother's daughter. That is enough. Maddie was training with the cadets of the Blade of Fire. Technically, she wasn't a student, but a mercenary with a combat rating of 76 and 4 years of field experience was bound to attract attention. The instructors invited her to spar. Cadets with ratings of 60 or 70 lost to her in a minute. She was faster, tougher, more experienced. She didn't fight beautifully. She fought effectively. One cadet asked why she wouldn't enroll in the academy. Maddie replied that she didn't need a diploma to beat people up. She needed someone worth fighting for. The cadet didn't get it. Lori returned 2 weeks later. Her father had survived. The unicorn's tear had worked. Duke Ashfield got out of bed for the first time in 6 months. Lori walked into the academy a different person. Not cold, not arrogant. Quiet, thoughtful. She found Caden in the dining hall. She sat across from him, without her entourage, alone. She said her father wanted to see him, that Duke Ashfield was inviting Caden to the estate, that he wanted to thank him in person, and offer his support. Caden nodded. But before the visit to the Duke, the tournament took place. The Tournament of the 5 Blades is 3 days of competition. Each faculty fields a team of 5. 5 rounds. Combat, search, strategy, survival, finals. Caden participated in the strategy round. The task? 2 armies on a board, blue and red. Blue is yours, red is the opponent's. Blue has a numerical advantage but low luck. Red has high luck but few troops. 5 minutes to come up with a plan. The Blade of Fire fielded its best fighter, a guy with a luck score of 82. His plan was a direct attack with a flanking maneuver. Classic. Textbook, page 43. Caden responded in 2 minutes. He didn't attack. He retreated. He lured the Red Army into a narrow gorge where numerical superiority matters, but luck doesn't. In the gorge, arrows fly in a straight line. Physics. Gravity. Aerodynamics. Luck doesn't change the trajectory of an arrow flying into a wall of people in a narrow space. Luck affects hits in open terrain. In the gorge, a hit is guaranteed. The jury deliberated for a minute. Blade of the Earth received the maximum score for strategy, for the first time in 14 years. But it wasn't Caden who decided the tournament final. The map decided the final. The last round. The final round. All 5 teams in the arena. The task was to find an artifact hidden somewhere in the Academy complex. The first to find it wins. Caden stood in the arena and thought. The map. The map hadn't worked on the medallion in Windmer Forest because it was an ordinary object. But if the artifact for the tournament is real, if it's not a fake but a genuine artifact from the Academy's collection, then the map might work. Because real artifacts are part of the system of probabilities. They're connected to the world, with the law of luck, with the impossible. Caden took out the map, quietly, under his jacket. He looked at it. A dot. Green. A find. Probability 0.003%. Coordinates? Under the arena, right beneath his feet. He looked at the arena floor. Stone. Slabs, just like in Altera's Hall of Judgment.
This world loves to hide things under the feet of those who are too busy to look down. Caden dropped to one knee. He found a crack between the slabs. He slipped his fingers in. He pulled. The slab shifted. Beneath it, in a palm-sized niche, lay a crystal. Blue. Glowing. The system highlighted it. Artifact detected. A shard of the Star of Alden. Rank, rare. From the collection of the Academy of the Five Blades. Hidden for the final round of the tournament. The arena fell silent. 1,000 spectators, 5 teams. Dozens of cadets had scattered throughout the academy in search of the artifact, and a boy with a luck rating of 0.3 found it right under his own feet, without moving an inch. Captain Vera stood at the edge of the arena. For the first time since they'd met, a smile graced her face. The Blade of Earth had won the Five Blades tournament. After the tournament, everything changed. Caden was no longer a boy with 0 luck. He became a man who wins in spite of 0 luck. The difference is enormous. The former is an object of pity. The latter is an object of fear. And those who had something to lose began to fear him. The Appraisers Guild struck a week after the tournament. Not in court, not in the town square, in the newspapers. Erlen had a system of leaflets that couriers distributed throughout major cities. The guild paid for the publication. The headline? A fraud at the academy. How a student with 0.3 luck cheats the system and undermines the foundations of the law of luck. The article was long, detailed, with quotes from experts, with graphs showing that the probability of Caden's finds was statistically impossible, with a conclusion. Either he's using forbidden magic or he's stealing artifacts. There's no third option. Caden read the leaflet and thought that in his old world, this was called an information attack. The goal wasn't the truth. The goal is public opinion. The facts don't matter. What matters is the presentation. And the presentation was perfect. Numbers, graphs, expert opinions, everything he himself had used as a tool, only now it was being used against him. The Academy's reaction was predictable. The leadership distanced itself from him. Captain Vera told Caden that she believed him but couldn't openly support him. Politics. The cadets were divided. Some considered him a hero, others a fraud. Still others waited to see how it would end. Lori came to see him that evening. She said that Duke Ashfield was offering protection, legal, political, financial. The Duke owed him his life, a debt of honor. Caden refused. Lori didn't understand. She asked why. Caden replied that if the Duke shielded him from the guild, the world wouldn't see Caden Rowe proving that luck isn't everything. The world would see Duke Ashfield's protege, and the whole story would turn into a game for aristocrats. But he wasn't an aristocrat. He was a nobody, and a nobody had to win as a nobody. Lori looked at him. The ice in her eyes cracked a little more. She said quietly that he was stubborn and stupid, and that she didn't understand why she liked it. And she left, quickly, without looking back. Maddie, who had overheard the conversation from behind the door, said that the aristocrat was melting. Caden said he had no time for melting. He had time for a plan. The plan was simple. The guild attacks publicly, so they must respond publicly. Not with defense, with an attack. Not with a rebuttal, but with proof. He found April Wong the next day, a bard chronicler, fortune 55. She was sitting in a tavern near the academy, writing something in her notebook. 19 years old, sun-kissed hair, freckles, a smile that lit up like a light bulb whenever she saw someone new. She saw Caden and her smile grew brighter. She said she knew who he was, that she'd heard the story, that she'd come to the academy specifically to find him. Because every bard dreams of a real story. And Caden's story is the only real one on a continent crammed with fake legends about lucky heroes. Caden sat down across from her. He asked why they were fake. April stopped smiling. For the first time since they'd met, her expression turned serious. She told him about her brother, also a bard. He'd written a song about a duke who'd lied about his exploits. The duke, with a luck of 87, declared the song to be slander.
A trial with a luck of 87 against a bard with a luck of 30 isn't a trial. It's an execution. Her brother was hanged for telling the truth. Since then, April has sworn to sing only what she can prove. All stories about lucky heroes are lies, embellished, edited, whitewashed. No one sings about how the hero with luck 85 robbed a village, or how the hero with luck 90 abandoned his squad at the first sign of casualties. Those stories don't sell. Caden's story sells because it's real. Caden offered a deal. He's giving her access to himself, to the team, to the discoveries, to everything. She writes and sings the truth, nothing but the truth, no embellishments, no heroics, just as it is, including his mistakes, including his fears, including 0.3. April held out her hand, said, "It's a deal," and added that he was the first man to offer her honesty instead of money, and that this was either the smartest move or the dumbest. She'd decide later. A week later, the song about Caden began playing in the taverns of the academy, then in the taverns of Altera, then throughout the entire region. April wasn't singing about a hero. She was singing about a boy who dug a hole for 3 hours while the whole village laughed at him. About a boy who found a cure for a stranger's mother one night in the swamp. About a boy who traded a legendary sword for a well. No grandstanding, no epic tale, just the truth. And the truth proved stronger than any of the guild's charts, because charts speak to the mind, but songs speak to the heart. In this world where numbers decide everything, the heart turned out to be the one thing no one had factored into the equation. The guild responded. Harshly. They declared Caden an outlaw within guild-controlled territory. All his future finds would be confiscated. Anyone who collaborated with him would lose their guild license. An economic blockade. Maddie said it was war. Caden said it was panic. The panic of the strong in the face of the weak whom they cannot crush. The most dangerous moment, because when cornered, the strong strike with all their might. And the blow came. At night. 2 figures broke into Hannah's room in the library wing. Masks, knives. They weren't going to kill her. They were going to scare her, to leave a mark, to cut her face so she'd remember. Hannah woke up. She screamed. For the first time in her life, she screamed at the top of her lungs. Maddie was sleeping 1 floor below. She heard the scream and was in the room 20 seconds later, with a sword, barefoot, in her nightgown. The fight lasted 4 seconds. One attacker fell with a broken jaw. The second jumped out the window and broke his leg upon landing. Maddie dragged him out from under the window by the collar and stood him on his broken leg. He screamed. She held him. Caden ran in a minute later. He saw Hannah in the corner, shaking, alive, with a cut on her cheek, a thin one, superficial, but bleeding. He dropped to his knees beside her. She grabbed his hand. She squeezed it. She wouldn't let go. Maddie was interrogating the second man. Roughly. Effectively. The mercenary confessed within a minute. He'd been hired by Magister Orton Vale, through a middleman. The goal was to scare Caden's companions so they'd leave him, to leave him alone, without a team, without support. Caden listened and counted. Orton Vale, head of the guild, the man who abandoned Hannah before she was born, the man who had now sent people to slash her face, not knowing she was his daughter. Or knowing. Caden wasn't sure which option was worse. That morning he made a decision. Enough with defending himself. Enough with reacting. It was time to attack. Not the guild. The system. The entire system. It was time to gather the artifacts, all 12 of them, and head for the heavenly temple. The map unfolded. 12 dots glimmered on the parchment, scattered across the continent. Distant. Impossible. Each with a chance of less than 0.001%. Caden looked at them and thought that 12 zeros weren't 12 impossibilities. They were 12 tasks. And every task could be solved if calculated correctly. The next year and a half were spent on the move. Caden didn't stay at the academy, he used it as a base. He'd leave for weeks at a time. He'd return with artifacts. He'd leave again. The map led the way. He followed. The team grew. Ji Yeon-so joined in the 4th month. The gunsmith's daughter. Crafting luck 44. Hands covered in calluses, face smudged with soot. She spoke in short sentences. She rarely laughed. She ate sweets on the sly so everyone could see. Caden found the hammer of truth for her, a tool that forges by design, not by strength. The chance of finding it was 0.00008%. He found it in a week, in an abandoned mine beneath a waterfall. When he held out the hammer to her, Ji took it with both hands. She looked at it, turned it over, felt its weight, and she cried, for the first time in front of a stranger. She said the hammer sings, that it's alive, that artifacts speak to her. All of them. Always. Ever since childhood. She thought she was going crazy. It turned out to be a gift, a rare one thought to be extinct. She hears the voices of artifacts, and they all say one name, Caden. Ticket of Destiny number 5. April became the 6th ticket. Not right away. 3 months later. For 3 months, she walked with them. She took notes. She sang. She flirted with everyone in sight, including Maddie, who didn't mind. She was sunny on the outside and sharp on the inside. She saw what others didn't notice. Details, contradictions, lies. One night by the campfire, she told Caden that she should have turned him into Royal Intelligence a month ago. Caden wasn't surprised. The analyst had noticed long ago. The questions were too spot on. Her appearance was too convenient. Her knowledge of where they were going and when was too precise. He asked why she hadn't turned him in. April looked at the fire. She said her task was to decide, was he an ally to the crown or a threat? She decided. He was neither an ally nor a threat. He was something else entirely. Something the crown doesn't have and can't control. The truth. A living, walking truth that uncovers the things the world hides from itself. Handing the truth over to intelligence means killing it, and April had sworn to speak only the truth. Caden asked what would happen now. She said that now she was with him, not with the crown. Let the crown send someone else. Fate's ticket number 6. The artifacts were being gathered. The 5th was found in a tree hollow on a farmer's pasture, a farmer who had been tying a goat to that tree for 30 years. The 6th was in the foundation of a temple in the town of Varus. The 7th was in the pocket of a dead traveler on the side of the road. The 8th was at the bottom of a well in a village that didn't even know it was drinking water from a legendary source. Each discovery was more absurd than the last. Each confirmed one thing. Artifacts aren't hidden in dungeons or fortresses. They're hidden in plain sight, in places so ordinary that no one looks there. Because lucky people search in lucky places, and artifacts lie in unlucky ones. In cows' stomachs, in beggars' sacks, in tree hollows where goats are tied up. The world is turned inside out, and only a person with a luck score of 0.3 sees it the right way around. On his 8th artifact, Caden found Mira. The map showed a dot. Type, encounter. Chance, 0.000003%. He went alone. He found her in the basement of a ruined temple on the kingdom's border. A little girl, about 12 years old, dirty, thin, mute. She was sitting in the dark, drawing with her finger in the dust. Circles, lines, symbols. When Caden entered, she raised her head, looked at him, and smiled, for the first time in her life. At him. Only at him. He took her by the hand, brought her into the light. The system flashed. Artifact detected. No, not an artifact. A living being. The heart of the world. The 12th and final artifact of the First Age, created by the gods of Erlin as a lock on the door of the celestial temple. Age unknown. Status active. Mira, not human, An artifact in the form of a child, alive, sentient, crying. Having waited 1,000 years in the basement of a ruined temple, Caden carried her in his arms back to camp. She weighed almost nothing, like a bird, like an empty shell waiting to be filled. The team accepted her without question. Hannah wrapped her in a blanket.
Maddie gave her food. G forged a small bracelet for her. April sang a lullaby. Lori, who by then had become part of the team, though she would never admit it out loud, brought clean clothes from her own supplies. Mira didn't speak, but she drew, on the ground, on paper, on the walls, circles and lines. Caden figured it out a week later. These weren't drawings. It was a map of the Celestial Temple. Mira knows where it is. She always has. She was waiting for someone to ask. Caden found the 9th artifact in the royal palace, in the throne room, beneath the king's throne. The king was not pleased, but arguing with a man known throughout the continent as the cartographer of the impossible proved politically unwise. The 10th was in the eagle's nest atop Steel Fang Mountain. The 11th was in the tomb of the founder of the Order of the Thousand Keys. The order did not interfere. They watched. Their leader, that very man in the mask, appeared twice, both times in silence. Both times he left a key, a real one, a bronze one, with runes. Caden had gathered 11 keys and 1 living heart. The 12th artifact remained. The map showed a point. Red, bright, pulsating. A definite find. Chances 0.0%. 0. Absolute 0. For the first time, the map showed 0. The coordinates were Windmer, Caden Rowe's house, the room where he grew up. The 12th artifact was at home. It had always been there, from the very beginning. Caden returned to Windmer 2 years after he left. The village had changed. New roofs, a new market. The healing tree by Hannah's house had grown to 3 meters tall. Its silvery leaves rustled in the wind. Old people and children sat beneath it. Wounds healed faster. Colds cleared up in a day. Windmer had become a village where people came to seek healing. Hannah's mother stood at the gate, healthy, rosy-cheeked, strong. She saw her daughter and ran to meet her. She hugged her for a long time. Then she saw Caden. She smiled. She said he'd grown up. Caden noticed that she hadn't called him Zero. No one in the village did. Our Zero had become a name of respect 2 years ago. Now it had become the name of a legend. April's songs had reached every corner of the continent. The cartographer of the impossible. The boy with a luck rating of 0.3 who found 11 legendary artifacts. Who defeated the guild. Who won the Academy tournament. Who found the living heart of the world in the basement of a forgotten temple. Caden's mother was waiting by the house. She had lost weight. She had aged. Her eyes were red. She didn't come out to greet him. She stood behind the door. When Caden entered, she said one word. "I'm sorry." Caden stood in the doorway of the room where he had grown up, small, cramped, with a ceiling of rotten planks. Nothing had changed. The same bed, the same chair, the same smell of sour dough and mold. He walked over to the bed. The map in his hands pulsed. The red dot was right here, under the bed. He moved the bed aside. Beneath it was the floor. Planks. Old ones. One was wobbly. He lifted the plank. Beneath it was dirt. In the dirt was a niche. In the niche was an object. Small, round, glass. A sphere, the size of an apple. Transparent. A light inside. Warm, golden, alive. The system flashed. Artifact detected. Seed of the beginning. Divine rank. The 12th artifact of the first era. The first to be created. The last to be hidden. Function. Activation key for the Celestial Temple. Note. This artifact was placed at the spot with the lowest luck on the continent, a spot no one would ever look for, under the bed of a boy with a luck rating of 0.3.
Caden held the sphere in his hands and realized, not a coincidence, not a fluke. His appearance in this body, in this village, in this house. Everything was planned. Someone had placed the 12th artifact under his bed long before his arrival. Someone knew that the cartographer would come here, that he would be born here, that he would grow up above the key to the world's freedom and never even realize it. Not until he was ready, not until he gathered the other 11, not until he believed that 0 was the beginning, not the end. He stepped out of the house. The team was waiting. Hannah, Maddie, Lori, Jay, April, Mira. 6 people. 6 women who followed him not because he had found the 12 artifacts, but because he'd found a cure for Mom. Because he'd untied the ropes in the forest. Because he'd traded the sword for the well. Because he hadn't charged for the tear. Because he'd offered honesty instead of money. Because he'd taken her by the hand and led her into the light. The artifacts were a side effect. People were what mattered. Mira took his hand. Small fingers. Cold. She looked up. She traced a line in the air with her finger. A line, a circle, an arrow, a direction. North, toward Mount Ale, toward the heavenly temple. They walked for 3 days, through forests and mountains. On the 2nd day, the Order of the 1,000 Keys found them. Not enemies, guardians. 20 men in cloaks with keys on their chests. The leader removed his mask. An old man, a face full of wrinkles, clear eyes. He said that 1,000 years ago, the first guardian hid 12 keys and made a prophecy. The cartographer will come, not from this world, from a world without magic, from a world where people reason rather than believe. He will gather the keys because he will not seek them for himself. 6 came before Caden and perished. They sought glory. They sought power. They sought for themselves. The map went blind. They went blind. Caden was the first to seek for others, the first to give, the first to value not the artifact itself, but the person who needed it. The Order joined him. On the 3rd day, they climbed Mount Ale. At the summit stood a temple, white, enormous, with columns of light. The door was locked. 12 keyholes. Caden arranged the artifacts. 11 keys in 11 keyholes. The 12th was for Mira. Mira approached the door. She placed her palm on the stone. A light flashed. The door opened. Inside there was silence, whiteness, emptiness, and in the center of the emptiness a table, made of stone. On the table lay a book, huge, open. On the page were formulas, numbers, equations, the law of luck, written in the language of mathematics, variables, coefficients, constants. Caden walked over to the book. He looked at it and laughed, quietly, then louder, then out loud, because the formula was right there in front of him. An insurance algorithm, a risk assessment system, exactly the same one he'd been writing in Seattle every day for 5 years. The gods of Erlen didn't create magic. They created an insurance model. They took a world full of chaos and uncertainty and superimposed a grid of probabilities upon it. To control, to predict, to manage. Luck isn't a gift. It's a parameter in a database. A number assigned to every person at birth. Not measured, assigned. The crystal ball doesn't read luck. It reads the value the gods entered into the system. 0.3 for Caden. 91 for Darian. Not because Caden is unlucky, it's because someone entered 0.3 in that field for him. Just as a clerk at an insurance company assigns a risk factor to a client they've never seen. Caden knew this system. He'd worked within it for 24 years. He knew every formula, every variable, every loophole, and he knew how to rewrite it. Not to break it, not to destroy it, to rewrite it. He sat down at the table. He picked up the pen lying next to the book, and he began to cross things out. Not everything, not luck in its entirety. Luck, as a coincidence, can exist. Good luck, bad luck, it's part of life. He crossed out a single line. The line that tied luck to a person's fate. A line that turned a number into a verdict. A line that told the world that 0.3 meant insignificance and 91 meant greatness. He replaced it with another, a simple one. Luck influences events. Luck does not define a person. One line, 20 characters. The pen touched the paper. The formula changed. A light flashed, brighter than the sun, brighter than anything. The temple trembled. Columns of light flickered and went out. Silence. Mira stood by the door. She was smiling, and for the first time in 1,000 years, she opened her mouth. She said one word in a soft, childlike voice. Free. The book closed. The temple began to crumble. Stones were falling. The light was fading. Caden grabbed Mira by the hand. He ran toward the exit. The team was waiting outside. Maddie was yelling at him to hurry up. Hannah was reaching out her hands. Lori stood there, pale, counting the seconds. Jay held the doorway with her hands as if she could keep the mountain from collapsing. April was recording. Even now, even at that very moment, she was recording. They ran out. The temple collapsed behind them. Dust, a rumble, and then silence. Caden lay on the ground. Mira was beside him. Alive, warm, real, no longer an artifact. A child. Just a child. The system flashed one last time. The law of luck has been updated. The link between luck and a person's fate has been removed. Crystal balls all over the world cracked simultaneously. All of them. In every temple. In every city. In every village. The numbers above people's heads went dark. They didn't vanish. They went dark. Like the screens of turned-off monitors. People will be lucky and unlucky. Coins will land heads or tails. Swords will strike true or miss. But no child will ever again stand before an orb that tells him 0.3 and puts an end to his life. No father will spit at his son's feet because of a number. No mother will turn away. No bride will run off to her brother just because his number is higher. Caden sat on the ground and looked up at the sky. Blue, clear, not a single number in sight. Hannah sat down beside him. She opened her notebook. She looked at him. She closed the notebook, and she said it out loud. For the first time, not through paper, for the first time with her voice. Quietly, tremblingly, but with her voice. I love you. Caden looked at her, at the girl who brewed potions and never looked away, who followed him into the swamp, to the library, and to the temple of the gods, who spoke through notes and remained silent with words, and who had finally spoken. To him. He replied that he felt the same. Maddie stood nearby, not looking at them. She was polishing her sword, but she was smiling. Lori stood a little further away. The wind ruffled her golden hair. She said quietly, I'm dropping my last name. I want you to see Lori, not Ashfield. Jay walked away silently and returned 10 minutes later. She handed Caden a ring. Small, rough, forged from the metal of the 11th artifact. She said she wanted to forge a ring for him. A different one. Later, when he was ready. April was sitting on a rock, writing. The last page of the last chapter of the last story about the boy with a luck rating of 0.3. She looked up. She smiled. She said it would be the best song she'd ever write. Mira sat on Caden's lap. She drew with her finger on his palm. Not a map, not symbols. A smiley face. A circle. 2 dots. An arc. A smile. Caden looked at the mountain, at the ruins of the heavenly temple, at the sky without numbers. And he thought that the data analyst from Seattle who had died after slipping on a banana peel had just rewritten the probability model for the entire world. The probability of such an event was 0.0%. 0. Absolute 0. His favorite metric. Far below, in the village of Windmer, village elder Gwen stepped out onto the square. In her hands were shards of a crystal ball. shattered in half. She looked at the shards. She looked up at the sky,
and she said, "Our zero." The wind carried her words toward the mountains. Caden didn't hear her, but he knew. Zero is not absence. Zero is the starting point.